surprise for you.
Okay.
You want to guess what it is?
This is an outfit for a newborn. You bought it this morning. You wanted to surprise me.
I'm sorry.
You're pregnant.
You know?
I know because you already gave it to me. This has happened before.
What are you talking about? What's going on?
Someone is coming. He's going to hurt us. He says you killed your father. I need to know what happened.
Why are you doing this? My father
Died of a heart attack?
No, I didn't have anything to do with...
Any second now, he's gonna knock on that door. Help me.
This isn't happening. This can't be happening.
Police, open up.
That's him.
Did you call the police?
We have a warrant. Please open the door.
I didn't do anything.
We're here to help.
Don't listen to him. I'm your only chance.
Open the door, right now.
You know me. I love you. You have to believe me.
Stop!
No.
Under arrest.
No.
Hey!
You're home. What are you doing? Are you okay?
Hello and welcome, Luis. How are you
Hello.
today?
I'm pretty good. Happy Friday, everyone.
Happy Friday. For those who don't know, can you tell everyone who you are and what 12 minutes is?
Yes, so I'm Luis Antonio. I'm Portuguese, originally from Lisbon. I'm a game developer. I've been in the industry for quite a while. I used to work I used to work at Rockstar. I was at Ubisoft. Then I went independent. Joined Jonathan Blow working on The Witness as an artist. So all my career was as an artist, and I always had this idea on the background of playing with time loops, and if there was some gameplay out of the idea of using time loops, and that's it. After The Witness, I learned to program, and I started to work on a prototype, and that prototype became 12 minutes, which came out very recently.
Yeah, and congrats on this game. It's getting a lot of accolades. It's as chat is is pointing out, that is an awesome. That trailer really is a great trailer. It really represents like the game. It does give me chills as well. Thank you for saying that in chat. It has a lot of great inspirations. I was super excited to play this game. It was probably one of my most anticipated games of this year. I think like when we first saw it at all the E3s and all the big events and stuff, everyone I knew in the indie industry, we were like, oh my gosh, this is the one game I'm going to be really excited about. But yeah, tell me a little bit about the game. What is it about for those who don't know? We're going to give some spoilers here. If you haven't played this game, probably shouldn't check out this stream. Please go play it, spend a whole evening playing, and then come back and watch this one.
Yeah, the game is super knowledge based, so if you get all the knowledge here, then it kind of breaks the experience.
Yeah, so yeah, 12 minutes before I'm gonna play a little bit, but just before, it's like the trailer showed. You play as the husband. You come home from work. You're having an evening with your wife, and then this intruder shows up. He accuses your wife of killing her father, and then you try to kind of intervene. You get knocked out. You go back to the start of the evening, and you have to use the knowledge of what's about to happen to try to change the outcome and hopefully break the loop. The whole game is in real time. The loop lasts 12 minutes, and everything happened inside the apartment. So it's almost like a theater play. There's 3 characters, and you control the one that is aware of the loop and has this knowledge.
I love that you say that it feels like a theater or play, because it is like, I love the fact that it's one room, very contained. It's probably one of my favorite types of storytelling in film and in games. It's like contained little scenes, like vignettes. I really love that.
Oh yeah. I remember like a lot of them, like Phone Booth.
Exactly. Yeah, that was what I was thinking of too.
Or Cube, or there's quite a few that are like very contained that I appreciate. So here, yeah, I'm gonna go over a bit the design of the game. Right, you control the character by moving the mouse. so it's very inspired in the old school point and click games in terms of I'm gonna pause actually. When it comes to inventory, it pauses. The reason is I was struggling to find a way to have a lot of dynamic ways of interacting with the characters that are not, you know, just shooting or platforming or so. Yeah, just when I had the idea of maybe I should go. Yeah, really quickly. When I had the idea of a time loop, I didn't know what the game would be like. Whether it would be a point-and-click narrative, or it would be a shooter, that was not decided. But in the end, it became this kind of narrative-driven experience, and I think the point-and-click is the genre that allows for a lot of variety. So yeah, you have elements in the world that hopefully are very logical. You know, you can pick up a mug, and then you can combine the objects in the world. So the game never tells you anything, but it's designed in a way that I hope it's kind of organic to figure out these things, right? So if I drag a mug to the sink, whatever is going to happen hopefully makes sense. So he fills the mug with water, and now you can interact. Like I could drop the mug at the table, or
Oh, we gotta clean that closet.
or give it to another character. And everything you do, your character learns
I'm not
about
thirsty
it.
anymore, but thanks.
So she already drank a glass of water, so she's not thirsty anymore. But maybe if I gave you the glass sooner. Yeah, so the game is in 3 rooms. There's the bedroom, there's the bathroom, and then time is passing by. Like I said, it's all in real time. And in the main menu, you can see how much time has passed. So we went over like 4 minutes. And then there's some mechanisms to allow you to speed up time. So actually before that, so your character learns with everything you do. So this is the first loop. I started a fresh game. So right now, the only things I can speak about are the things that I've been told already by my wife, which is that she's prepared a special evening, and you can tell, hey, let's have the dessert.
What's the occasion?
I'll tell you over dessert.
So I'm gonna leave the conversation, and then we have some mechanisms around the apartment that allow you to manipulate time in the situation.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna use one of them, which is the bed.
Always shocks me when that happens. Even now when I'm watching and not playing.
Actually, before I use that, I might just go over stuff. Yeah. So there's a first-person camera when you interact with some items.
Electric bill today.
Right. So when you open the fridge, you can go first person, and it's the same logic of picking up items, or combining them. You can observe some of them.
I actually really love that this is like a return to the glory of point and click games, you know. I love point and click games. Hasan does too. We talk about them all the time. We've bonded so much over it.
Insert Grim Fandango reference.
Yeah. We've talked about Grim Fandango so much, and you know, you're like, I played this game already. I played it last night again, and I'm watching you play it, and it's just so immersive.
Me?
And I think that was the huge issue with some of the point and click games is like, people were trying to make more immersive games where like you're talking about items and things that are everywhere. You can interact with everything. It was like a limitless sandbox, open world kind of concept when that shift to point and click to like games like Far Cry and all that happened. And I think this game feels so intentional, right? Like all the items are there. You're meant to interact with them. It's meant to like facilitate the story. So I'm really happy to see that in this game.
Yeah, like something I don't know how well it was solved, and I think that's up to players to decide. But like I think with point and clicks, that's how I grew up. Like Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, Grim Fandango, even like the Broken Sword ones. I love them, but there's always this thing where, right? Suddenly, like let's say, like suddenly you'll be able to open the window and jump out the apartment, or there's something that is hidden somewhere, or some, right? There's a lack of. There's a lot of guessing, I guess, which I know this game has a little bit of it too, but something that I tried to explore was that, right, once you know everything that's in the apartment, those will be your tools. Like literally for the rest of the game, there's nothing else but the elements that are here. So I'm gonna...
What is going on?
Now you.
I
Hands
wanted to
behind
kill
your
the
back,
cop,
please.
but
Will you come help me?
I wasn't fast enough.
No, come on. Don't.
So yeah, so another character, like, you know there's a cop coming,
I don't know.
and once he starts talking with the wife, he will acquire all the knowledge of what's
This is a
going on.
misunderstanding.
And I'm gonna so yeah, like most players get it, right? You have a knife, I'm handcuffed, so maybe I can grab the knife and get the handcuffs.
I don't know.
You're
And,
under arrest for your father's murder.
And something else that I realized that came out of this game, like usually like we're used to reacting to everything in games, right? Something happens and you try to react to it, but in this game, not reacting is not a fail state. It's just another way of acquiring information, and I didn't know that would happen. And I think it's pretty interesting that it kind of changes what we're used to, of getting to the end of the level. But here, there's no end, there's no levels, so everything you do is just more information that you might be able to use later on for different
that can't
things.
Be right.
Shut up. You know what this is. Now.
Yeah, I think when we talked about this game previously in other conversations together, I talked about another game we talked a lot about inspirations, and I think chat is already like super interested. Like, what's all the inspiration? There's so much film inspiration. There's so many other games that are inspired by this, and people already pointed out, it's like, is the carpet on the floor when you first start off, is it inspired by The Shining?
It is. I mean, that carpet, I just put a placeholder. So I realized for a long time the game would start straight into the apartment. But a lot of people would be like, look, it's very unfair that I don't know how to play the game. I'm figuring out as the loop is starting. So I was like, I need a little entry section for the world. And it makes sense to be before you get into the apartment. And I just put a carpet there. And then people just connected with it. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of a nice nod to Kubrick, because it's a big inspiration. So it just stay there. So I'm just gonna show one more quick thing where right now I've my options with the wife have increased because of everything I've went through. So right now I can tell her, I think it's the same day, there's a cop coming, and the cop, right, he was accusing the wife of murder, so I can also mention that and talk with her about it. And I think that's it in terms of gameplay, right? So the game keeps expanding as you the more information you get, the more you learn. And then there's this, because it's all a loop, it's all designed, and right, there's spoiler warnings from the beginning, so I'm going to be very comfortable spoiling everything. But since I'm here in the world, right, there's
Must be a relief for you.
Oh yeah, it's like the apartment iteration process was all about these things, right? Like, why is she singing in the bathroom for 30 seconds before you get out of the loop? Why is the closet at that angle and you can look at it? Almost like, you know, when movies try to signal some information that will come as relevant later on, trying to make that every single thing you learn is relevant all the time.
Later.
Best night ever. Guess. Let me know when you're in the mood.
You all...
So he's
What?
realizing he's
I don't know. What? But no. I was just... How is this possible?
Yeah, so, and then there's, I tried, that's the other thing with movies. Like, movies are very intentional with every single thing they do. So for example, I was like, how do I show to the player that the closet is a location for you to hide without saying it through words? And then just having the blinds and this camera angle, everyone is like, I'm hidden. So there was a lot of this grammar from other mediums that it just helped tailor this, I think, to make it more movie-like experience.
I think I talk about this really often on the stream. You know, we talk about like, oh, you know, great games that end up being turned into movies, and they tend to not do super well as films, because games are an interactive medium, and a step up from that is not something that's so incredibly intentional, like or curated like a film, right? So to me, this felt like such a step up from a great game. It was even more interactive, and it really felt cinematic in every way possible. Lots of decisions led to that, like especially the fact that you had great actors. So like you said, there's a grammar and language that's already understood. It's like, oh, I recognize those voices. I recognize that there's like scenes, but just the integration of all the interactive elements, I think really, really makes it a fun experience. I really understand the vernacular of like point and click games. I know that you have to go through the narrative and you have to click on every single thing in the room and you collect all of it, you know, whether you need it or not. That's like the biggest thing. But still, when I played this game, I would often forget to do it because it was just so engrossed in the storytelling. And I think that's really, a testament to the fact that you're doing something really cool here with the game.
Cool.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about, somebody in chat asked like the game perspective is kind of spooky. Do you want to talk about whether or not that was intentional, that you always had this top-down view?
Yeah,
It is Halloween season.
yeah, I mean the
questions.
So like I said, like I knew zero programming, and for many years I tried to, like I knew there was something interesting about the time loops, and it's funny that this came out and now there's a ton of time loop games, but at the time that wasn't really the case. But as I wanted to do a time loop game, and I tried to get people to collaborate. Like, let's get a programmer, let's get other artists. But right, it's very hard to get someone to give their free time, especially for a game developer, to work on someone else's idea. And then I, working on The Witness, being surrounded by programmers and being on this more independent environment. There were other developers that come into the office, and they're doing their own games, and you see this. There's this magic happening, you know, where someone has an idea, they go into a room and they come out, and suddenly you have an experience that they just created on the fly versus what I'm used to in the big studios, where you go to a meeting, there's a design document, it's assigned to a programmer, and I realized, okay, if I really want to develop this concept, I need to learn to program. And this is like a long answer to say that when I finally sat down to program, it's pretty tricky if your first thing is to do 3D camera movement. So I was like, let's do a lot of the basic design in 2D. So I just got a top-down camera, so I only have to worry about 2 axes and, you know, focusing on character movement and just, you know, like the basics, raycast, right? I didn't even know, you know, right, getting a ray coming from the mouse cursor through the camera, hitting the world, which gives you a point, and then you move a character. So I kept 2D for the prototype. Like I knew by then that I would have the apartment with the husband and the wife. And then every time I was going 3D and I was like, okay, let's do like third person, let's do first person. It took away from the experience. It was just making it more complex for no reason. And my wife, she doesn't play games. She's not a big fan of games. So for many years, I've tried to get her to play games. And I remember we sat down once to play Portal 2. And she spent like 2 hours running towards the wall, right? Trying to learn how to move and look up. And I realized, well, there's a big barrier in us in the industry, you know, Steam, consoles, like we know all these things, but most people, they don't even know, like
take
Twitch.
It for granted.
What exactly? And I realized, okay, can I make a game that does not compromise in terms of design and puzzles, but is very accessible? And that kind of, I try to see how long can I keep that going for? And the top down, right, I ended up becoming like, there's this thing in game development, right? You want a screenshot of your game to immediately tell you what the game is about, like what the game is without, right, in the millions of games that come out every day. And the top down quickly realized that it's going to be pretty iconic if I stick to it. So it served many purposes. Like, it's easy to communicate, you get this voyeuristic peek into the life of this couple, you get the theater look, you get easy control. So I kept having more and more reasons to stick with it.
I think it was iconic. I remember seeing the trailer, like you definitely achieved that, watching the trailer for the first time and seeing this one camera angle and the whole trailer just being from that top-down view and seeing the characters just moving around, going about their day and different things happening. That was so like unique. I'd never seen anything like that before, and everybody noticed. Everybody noticed that, I think. And to what Carol said earlier about the game feeling super immersive, I think just because you spend so much time in this camera angle and, you know, the pace of the game and the fact that you go through loops, it really gives you like time to really get lost in that room, really, and the atmosphere and the, you know, the sounds of the rain outside and the thunder outside, and you kind of forget that you're in your room when you're playing this game. After a while, you really just get lost in that one shot, kind of like what happens when you're watching a play or something like that. You know, you're looking at one image for a long time. I think that's what happens, and really helps with that iconic feeling.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I could go over the where it all started, right? The whole beginning of it. I think so. Yeah, I mentioned this a couple of times, right? The game started as like I was very much stuck on the idea of a Groundhog Day, 24-hour cycle. There's a city, and so when I thought about this, I was still working at Rockstar, and this was a long time ago. GTA 4 had just came out, and we had the engine of GTA 4, and I was like, imagine we use this engine, but we simulate every single person and movement and everything, and then we drop a person there, and this thing, right, resets, and you have to figure out a way to move around. But what I realized when I sat down to write a bit about this was that it's very hard to understand the consequences of your actions if the if the complexity of the simulation is too big. Right, I had an idea. If you gonna like you wanna access your boss's computer because he has some information about something, so you're making him have a car accident, so you go earlier to work and he's not there. But how the hell do you convey that cause? First, how do you convey that causing a traffic accident will allow you to make him be late to work, and if he's late to work, that right? There's all this complexity for nothing. So I tried to compress more and more, not only the time of the loop, but the space that it happens, the characters that are in it. And suddenly, as things became more immediate, you know, like a cop comes in, you immediately have an objective. You want to stop this guy from coming in or hurting you and your wife. People became engaged. So once I had that frame, I tried to develop a narrative around it. And I dug up some pretty old documents that I could share about this.
Yeah, we can take a look back at the Luisa screen, see all these great things.
So, like, I guess I would start like yeah, I'm gonna go pretty deep into this, I guess. This all started, right? Like, I'm working on The Witness full time as an artist, and I'm thinking about this concept. And I think when you start a project, there's a lot of just figuring out what is interesting or not about it. For a lot, so for a year or two, I wasn't even touching Unity. I was just like, I would go on a walk with a friend and tell him, "Look, you came home and you're with your wife, and then some dude knocks at the door. What do you do?" And he'll be like, "Okay, I open the door." Okay, open the door. He does this, and then I would try to see what is interesting in the experience of what is happening, and what are the things that I could tailor around. And I kept writing linearly, like a book, like what that narrative would be. But what would end up happening was that I would get lost. Like, after 5 minutes of a loop, there's so many permutations that I could not control that. So then the next challenge was figuring out a way to kind of organize the information. And this was one of the early, it's like from 2013, I think, one of the early, like, I knew some things. I knew that you have to come home to start the environment, and there has to be a parity between your knowledge and the character knowledge, so he cannot know anything. So he learns the same time as you in parallel. And then I knew that something would have to happen to make you react. And this goes back to what I was saying about making a game accessible. Like, I think we have a lot of rules in video games now, with scores and levels and points and winning and losing states, that I think come from, I mean, I think we can use these things to guide how we design something, but we can kind of put them more on the background. So I wanted to do a bit of that, where there's an objective, but you don't get a objective. Stop the cop. You just naturally try to go through it. So I tried to create a story that would, by itself, give you hints on what to do without being too constrictive, but it would still allow you to feel that you're the one that's in control of the situation. So yeah.
Do you feel like because that thing that you're talking about, like, oh, there's an objective that comes up, there's some kind of HUD like with explanations and maps and all that, that's like comes from, I think, largely like the bigger game studios, where they feel like they're catering to a massive mainstream audience and new gamers as well, so they want to handhold a lot to make sure you're successful at the game. Do you think that that's made a new generation of gamers who just like aren't really good at like being intuitive in a game?
I mean, yeah, I think there's seasonal things. Like now, like a lot of people, 12 minutes, sometimes they're like, when do I get the next level? Why is this so slow, you know? Or when they get stuck, you know, straight to the internet. While in the Monkey Island days, I would be stuck for 3 months. I would go to school, and maybe a friend of mine managed to figure out this puzzle, and we can move forward in the narrative.
I remember Tim Schafer in an interview one time was saying, like, getting stuck and sitting in your car driving like to work and thinking about the puzzle. He's like, wasn't that gameplay? Exactly, like that time spent in the car, but not anymore. Now it's
so 12 minutes is a lot designed around that idea of like, you could shut the game down and, you know, okay, I need to, like, you set yourself an objective, right? I need to know, and I'm so glad I can spoil all this now, right? I know that she knows about the pocket watch, because when the cop is killing us, she's about to confess where the pocket watch is, but right, but it's too late, I die. So like, what if I wasn't there. Could I not be there so I know? So she tells the cop where the watch is. Maybe I could hide. Where could I hide? Oh, I can hide in the closet. Oh, but when I hide in the closet, she knows you're hiding in the closet. Oh, because she saw me hiding, you know? So I always imagine this thought process being when you're driving in your car and you were stuck. But I think we're in a generation where it's like you go online and you like how to find out where the watch is, which is okay. I mean, but the game was more designed with those old school ways of thinking. Yeah, but what I was saying, like what you mentioned, I think it's like films. Films, they do have a structure, right? You need to introduce, like, if a character is in a location, you have to introduce the location, then you zoom in onto the character, you have to kind of show the journey that he's going through, or you know, there has to be some exposition that you try to hide through certain ways. And I think in games we have the same thing, where you have a structure, levels, objectives, but it's more finding a way for them to be hidden or just more organic. That's what I was curious about it, and I think there's a lot of work we can do as developers on those areas where you could, like even Red Dead Redemption 2, like I think that game you could just have no objectives, and they have those situations that happen as you play the game where things happen in front of you that they seem very random, but they're completely scripted. So you could build a narrative that just flows into those scenes, and there's
the
no
whole
UI.
game is just that.
Yeah, and there's some games who tried a bit of that, and I think some of the inspirations, like Prince of Persia, the first one from Jordan Mechner, or Another World. I remember those games had this magical nature to them where you don't know what's going to happen, and you feel you're in this movie kind of experience. You still would die and restart the level, but there was something about them. But going back to this, I realized that there was a start of the level, and so I just started to do like how writers do. You just drop things in. So I had like, you sit on the couch, your wife joins you, you talk with each other. Yeah, the characters had names, and they still had names through production, so we could talk with each other about what the husband is saying to the wife. But then they were dropped. So you're gonna know Aaron and Sarah were the original name. But yeah, I was trying to see how a narrative goes, like the things you can do, what happens in the narrative, what you learn about things. I didn't even know, like, will your character change as you go through the loop? Will he go from being a happy person to be very frustrated and sad? If that happens, right, these things started to come up as consequences, right? If your character is highly unstable because he's doing these crazy things, then you're losing control of the character as a player. So there has to be there's a limit of how much he can change, but he still has to evolve through the loop because he's literally the only point of reference of your progress. The level won't change, you don't get armor, you don't get weapons, you don't get anything. All looks the same, but his knowledge. So as I was writing the story, I was seeing that these things would exist, and there would be some gates, right? There's the gate of starting the loop. There was a gate when the cop rings at the door, that no matter what, right, it will change whatever's been happening until then. And then you see, I didn't know what to do after. There was no more story after the cop coming in. There was just this understanding of the elements.
Is it fair to say you were like you're trying to write a non-linear story, but in a linear fashion, like with a linear workflow? Was that your first? This is your first attempt at the story, right?
Yeah, this was. I didn't even know that would be a story, right? I realized, there has to be some sort of narrative to drive the player, but I was just still at the point of just what are the elements, and what I was realizing was, for example, the things you can do before the cop arrives, they cannot kind of be grouped into categories. So I started to see, like, for example, all the things you can talk with the wife about, and something I realized was that the game is actually about knowledge, like your XP or your weapons. It's all about knowledge, and knowledge is what is gonna define everything. So I start to see these patterns of knowledge about the day's restarting, knowledge that you can live the same day. Then there was this thing like, if it's knowledge, how can we keep this interesting? So right, so if this cop, like early on, it was a bunch of burglars. I was like, there's your home, you're having an evening, there are these burglars coming in because they want something in your apartment. But I'm like, what if what they want is something that the wife knows about? Then we have this extra layer of trying to dig through the information that she's aware. And so it was just playing with knowledge and the environment to see what is interesting and captivating. Not really know where it goes, even though I knew that like there were some things that I think were important, you know, like going back to film. Like if someone shoots you on your knee, you're gonna be limping for the rest of your life, very likely, right? Even if you do like physical therapy and surgery, like you're gonna feel cold in the winter. But in movies, right, you get shot in the shoulder, and next scene the main character is climbing a mountain and he has a little patch on the shoulder.
Yeah. And
I felt there was this, and games have this, right? You like Red Dead Redemption, I don't know how many people I killed in that game. Like I'm a mass murderer. So I wanted to bring it down to this reality where someone coming into your home and attacking you, it's traumatic, right? It's huge. So how can we bring all these things down so that the characters can be more alive and you care more about what's happening versus, you know, so I knew the narrative would have to go about these relationships and just hold on to a guy coming in and beating you up. That's enough to like if the sound design and the mood and the animation and everything supports it, we can ground. Right, you don't have to save the world every time you play a game, right? You can just, you know, make people happy or something along those lines. So yeah, so there was this graphic. It's not that interesting, but it was just me trying to realizing that linearly I could not write this. But I start to see these categories, and then I have another graph here, like maybe a year later or a few months later, where I start to see there were groups of things that happened that you could look at, and flowchart, right, was the only way I could zoom in and out to the complexity.
And so people in chat are wondering what program you're actually using.
Oh, that's a good question, actually. So that was also another one. When I realized I needed a dynamic way to use to organize thoughts and information and narrative, I started to look at there's Twine, there's Visio, there's the like Office has its own package of flowcharts. There's quite a few packages of there's mind map stuff. So I just kept looking at the different. I used a ton of them, and I realized like some of them are too focused on putting things in the right location or designing the nodes, and then I stumbled on this one. It's called YED. It's open source. It's very dynamic. It exports as like right. The GraphML format is like XML, so it means it can be read by other programs and allows you to create your own data and labels, which means that as I was dabbling into programming, I knew this information could somehow be used later on for other things. And I just it was just easy to use. It's very easy to use. It's very friendly. The developers are very active on it, and it has this scale of zooming in and out and organizing stuff that I just stumbled and I liked. So I stuck with it. So yeah, so I started to see that were like, for example, the cop comes in. Once the cop is in the apartment, he can interrogate you and the wife at the same time. He could interrogate just you and him if you somehow remove the wife from the equation, or he could just interrogate the wife alone. So there were these patterns of paths that I could start digging into. Like, for example, this one is just the cop interrogating you. And then like I would see once again, what is the status of the world? So there was the knowledge you have of the situation, and there was the situation you're in. Like, are you handcuffed or not? If you are, maybe he doesn't, he talks with you, you know, like, sorry to disturb you, I'm here about your wife, I need to speak with her. So I just tried to make a narrative, and then I was like, okay, you're gonna have to reply. What kind of replies can you give? And I think this is where the point and click direction started to become clear in terms of you're gonna have to be talking with characters, you're gonna have to have choices of what things you wanna say, and you wanna be using objects in the world to your
So all of this was done before you knew that this was going to be point and click style gameplay.
Yes,
All this
I mean,
first.
on Unity, I was literally just learning, you know, how to script, what are variables, what's a function. I had used Unity as an artist before, but not on the side of programming. So I was just trying to make. I knew it would be in an apartment. I knew I would have people, so I was just trying to make them move around, whether I was using the mouse to control them or a keyboard or clicking or where they would go. But I didn't know exactly what shape the world would take. And I was just modeling, because I'm an artist, I was just modeling things. I was trying different sizes of apartments, different scales, different rooms. For example, I remember very early on, when I got characters moving and I got the navigation working, there was a coffee table in the middle of the living room. So when the cop was going to arrest you, right, you could do a Benny Hill. You keep going around the coffee table and he keeps going after you, and you would be in a circle forever, one after the other, because he cannot catch you up. So I was like, okay, I cannot have any, there can be no circular elements in the world, because then you can just forever run away. So there was this understanding the tools I have, and then this outside work of understanding the narrative. So then, right, there was a simple chart that moved into this one, and then when I had these groups, I started to see I had to actually look at the characters themselves, right? I have to look at the world from the point of view of the wife. What is her direction? Or I have to look at the world from the point of view of the cop. So I start to color code them, right? The cop is the blue guy, the wife was purple, and the player was yellow. And then I start to get these narratives I had and trying to find a way to organize them, and seeing things where, right, when the cop enters the house, we can branch into 3 different things that could happen. Whether he knows you're home, whether he knows she's home, right? Does he go straight to her, or does he go straight to you? If he goes straight to you, what does she do? So just slowly expanding not only their behavior, but also like I showed it here, I was trying to write also what they would say to each other. So I was like, okay, there's going to be dialogue, there's going to be behaviors. Yeah, and then it became this spaghetti mess. And then I jumped into the engine to start to get this into code as I was learning to program. And I think I could show the original prototype. Like I have a video here of Giant Bomb.
So each of these nodes directly connected to the engine, right?
No. I didn't know how to do that then.
So eventually.
Yes. So at this time, I was just literally writing in code all the dialogues. I would make a string for each line. I learned to make lists, so I guess I could put them all in order, and then I could call them up. Oh, I need to make a dialogue system. I would go to the asset store. I would download a dialogue system, but then like dialogue systems are not based around this repeated knowledge. And then I'm like, actually, everyone's knowledge evolves through the loop, right? The cop knows that she's home and you're home. The cop knows that maybe you know where the watch is. The wife knows that the cop is coming. But when it goes back to the beginning, the wife and the cop no longer know these things, but you still have your knowledge intact. And all these dialogue systems, they weren't designed with that in mind. They were more, more of a linear conversation. You have this branching, but the branching, what if the branching happens again and one of the characters know what he's talking about? So I started kind of to create a dialogue system. That's when it started to grow. But it was all coded. It was a nightmare. Like there were pages and pages of conversations, and I was coming back to these documents. Like these nodes were actually for me to know that I had implemented them or not in the engine. So I was using these as a reference of what I was writing in code. And then I had a prototype, which is what I have here. I don't know if there's any questions. If I just keep on going.
You can keep going.
Okay. So then there was a game, right? There was this narrative. Like there's this interesting thing that I never experienced as a designer, because I was always an artist. Where as an artist you come to a project, or you might be developing the visuals of a world while the designers are developing the scripting language they will use to make the gameplay and the game. But as a designer, especially on an indie scale, like for a year or two, the characters were boxes, right? Each box had a color, the couch was a box, but there's a point that these boxes start to have personality, and suddenly you're putting meaning into all these things. And I think that's a very special moment that I loved as a designer, that I didn't know it existed. And once that happened, I started to rely more on the prototype to show it to people versus talking about things in an abstract way. So for example, the wife sitting down, the cube would go into this simple couch that's here. And people would be like, look, I don't get it that she's sitting down. So I would start, crafting. The direction for development was based on what was missing and what I was trying to communicate. So it was a very organic process.
Yeah, I guess it's the difficulty of not having all the assets right from the get-go, right?
But I think having the assets from the get-go would be like that's if I had all the assets and I wanted to change something, I would have to redo. Like imagine a couch takes 2 weeks to do. If suddenly I don't want a couch,
then it's just a waste of time.
Yeah,
Waste of your
I mean,
time.
you want to stay in the most simple possible version of what it is you're doing until you know the next need, I think. So it stayed like that, and then something started to emerge, the way you move. And I just want to show this prototype because I think it shows kind of how the game was supposed to be in a way, where... Yeah, so there was a lot of camera movement. There was no... The core was there in terms of husband and wife. The narrative itself, it was locked from early on. There was this, like I had this clear understanding that you will have to learn about the other. What I found interesting is that you learn about these other characters. You shape, right? You shape how they behave based on what you know, but at a certain point, things will turn towards you. Like you've been judging all these characters throughout the game and what they know and their past and what they've done, and at a certain point the light is going to shine on you and what you've done and what you know and how you deal with that after you've been dealing with the other characters. So the structure kind of came out pretty early. So right, there was a dinner, there was like things were different, like design, like there was a soup early on, you had bread, you see here you could dip into the soup. But then a lot of players wanted to throw the soup at the cup, so I had to remove the soup. There was knives and forks. They wanted to use the forks. The bread was too abstract. Like, what is the bread for besides eating? And you could dip it in the sauce.
Eat the cup.
Exactly. Or you could drop objects on the ground, so people would spend hours. Like I'm gonna put 2 glasses of water on the floor. He's gonna trip on them.
Oh wow! Yeah, people were getting really creative. I mean, you give them the tools, they want to get creative, right?
Exactly. So it was a process of just removing. It was removing things, removing elements. Like, for example, if you look here in the bathroom, there was a pregnancy test on the trash bin. So you could learn about the pregnancy through the present or to the pregnancy test. But why have 2 items to do the same task? Why not? Right. By removing the trash bin, and then finding. Right, and then there would be this richness of, the present also serves to prove you're living the same day because you open knowing what's inside. It helps to know that she's pregnant. I could start to see that the more I remove, the elements that remained became much more rich and meaningful. And so whenever I had a challenge in the narrative that I wanted to solve, I would always look with what I have there. Can I use those things? There were always clocks. You can see there was clocks on every room. I believe the player really needed to know what time it is so they could plan around. Okay, in 3 minutes the cop is coming, in 4 minutes this is happening. And the camera was moving all the time. So this was all, like, this is a prototype, like, so I made everything, right? There were no collaborators. This was me on my free time just working on this. And I had this prototype that everyone said was pretty cool and they enjoyed playing, right? I think when you have something that people will play for more than an hour, you're onto something in terms of game design. And so I was working on The Witness at the time while doing this, and I was like, would this game be interesting to everyone else but myself? So I decided to go to PAX East, where I took this prototype with me and got the whole world to play it. And I think there's something very interesting in there where when I showed 12 minutes for the first time, I didn't say it was a time loop. I thought people will be really excited to find out they're in a time loop game. But what happened is that no one would play the game. They were like, this looks like The Sims. You're just home, you're eating. So I suddenly realized how marketing is as important as developing your game, because you need to know what you're selling. You need to understand how other people perceive your product. And so at PAX East, like, these 3 days were not only... there was this learning, like, when I approach someone to look at the game, I have to tell them, look, Groundhog Day? Yeah, it's kind of Groundhog Day. You're home with your wife, and then something's going to happen. And suddenly they were, I want to try this. There were people like Kotaku played it, Polygon, Giant Bomb, all these outlets play the game. They loved it. They start talking about it. And I was like, great. I think there's something in this. So then I started to look how can I make this happen? Like, how can I safely stop working full time on someone else's project and get this going?
I love that you're showing the before and after, because some people in chat are mentioning, like, you know, it's so nice to see it. Freeman says so nice to see the before and after. And a lot of people before the chat, like the stream started, they were like, oh, why couldn't you have done this or that? So I'm really glad that you mentioned. I think the mark of really great work actually is curating and like removing things, not to like dig on like Lord of the Rings, which endlessly just goes on forever and nothing's curated. It's a masterpiece, but
I'm sorry, what? Can the producer just kick Carol off the stream real quick? No.
No, I mean, I think there's some, like, I agree, I totally agree, and I think, like, as an artist, something that bothered me on these big companies was this, like, when you make a game, you get the artist, and so at Ubisoft I was art director, so I live this like in person, where you have this, we're gonna make a medieval game. So you go out to your corner and you're gonna look at castles and armor and build these soldiers. But I'm always like, where does this soldier come from? Like, what is his task? What is his position? What is he fighting for? What is he doing? So we can tell all this narrative through the art. But it's very hard to pull that off when you have 500 people working on a project, because you cannot have the artists waiting for the game design to be figured out. And working on The Witness was a breath of fresh air, because as an artist there, we would really spend months and months just thinking about, like, The Witness, for those that played it, right? There's a volcano, there's a mountain there, not a volcano, but there's a mountain. How is a mountain formed? If there's a river, what direction does the water flow? How does the riverbed look? Like, even the structures, like there's a castle on The Witness where we made the bricks on the castle really big. And then we had architects that told us, look, if you have bricks this big, it means that you probably had slaves to carry these gigantic bricks, because if your population is building these things, you need smaller bricks so you can carry them from the docks into the castle. There was this understanding of how things are made, and that understanding will create narrative and inform the players. So for 12 minutes, because I was designing everything, there was this, you know, how do I do the UI? How do you look at your inventory? How can I make the inventory not be in your face, but still be there? Or, like, for example, a very interesting thing, and now it bothers me when I play certain games, was when I wrote the dialogue system, you'd have the classical thing where the lines, you know, they tuck, 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 they showed up as a typewriter. And then when someone stops talking, you have to click so the next person speaks. I'm like, why don't they just keep talking? Mm-hmm. You know, I don't need to. And then suddenly there was this fluidity in the conversations. You didn't have to press A to get the next line of dialogue. And you kind of get what they're saying. Like, there was another thing. Let's reduce these conversations to the basic things that have to be said, versus, like, in my early script, the cop would come in and be like, good afternoon, I have a warrant, could we sit down and speak all together? And I'm like, what if you don't want to sit down? Now I have to write all this branch of conversation. But if the cop just comes in and is like, you're under arrest, and puts you back on the floor, suddenly I don't have to do all this branching of, I don't want to sit on the floor, let's talk about it, because it doesn't add anything. And movies do this very well, right? Your characters don't go to toilet, they don't, you know, a meal, everything gets cut off and streamlined. So I can actually streamline reality in the game. And the other thing is, like you seen what's playing there was, by simplifying the items, I can drive you to what you can do. Like for example, early on, you could give the knife to the wife, or you could use the knife to stab the cop. But if the knife has two different uses, then it opens that adventure game thing. Or, okay, maybe if I give the knife to a certain character in a certain point in the game, it will do something different from what it's doing right now. And suddenly you don't know what the knife does. So by the knife attacking every character, you have this more constant understanding of how the world works. And by limiting the usage of the inventory items, you would never think like, oh, maybe I can drag the couch to block the door, or I could break the window and jump out and leave the apartment. Like a first-person shooter, you don't think about dropping the gun on the floor and dialing a phone that's in the environment. You know kind of the verbs that the game has. And this prototype helped me figure all these things out. Which I think leads to the next step of like making this actually happen as a game, which was like, how do I get money to make this game without having to work on something else and getting a salary, which was looking for a publisher. And I think so that was like a year of just, I think once you have a prototype, it changes a lot your relationship with everyone who might be interested in financing a project, because a lot of unknowns, right? If you have one level of a game and you say it's going to have 30 levels, are you sure you can pull off 30 levels of those mechanics? And if you suddenly have investment and you're 3 months into your game and you realize, wow, it's a lot more fun if we do this, but you already have a production built and all this. And then that's an issue I see with a lot of indies, where if you sign on too early and you haven't really solved all your creative processes, it will be very hard to think creatively once you have this ticking time clock of time and money. So having this prototype, I was like, yeah, I know I need 3 characters. I know the apartment. I might move things around, but there's going to be a table. There's going to be chairs. I could much more easily understand what the budget would be needed, and there were a lot less challenges. Like I already had some positive press around the game. So I started to look for publishers that would let me, because the game is pretty heavy in some aspects, and some publishers were they didn't want that to happen. So I was finding someone who would understand what I want to do and still have the creative freedom. So I joined the Idea at Xbox program, which was great. They just gave me a lump sum and they were like, do whatever you want, just make sure the game comes out eventually. And that's kind of, the game was supposed to be what you're seeing now, but just more polished. There was
Can we talk a little bit about, like, I think you kind of glossed over it, but showing that early prototype is really important, right? Like, there's a lot of change between the game now and what you're showing, like what's playing on screen. But we'd love to know how Unity is actually helping with that. Some people in chat are already like, oh, I would love to make a game in another game engine, but like, the early lift is pretty difficult sometimes. But I think Unity actually really helped you with this, right?
Yeah. Let's. I'm gonna load up Unity here and go about. Let's go over this. Like, I think one thing is the asset store. The asset store, it's crazy good for things, for, like, for example, the blood simulation when someone gets shot. I realized there was I was talking with French programmers, like, oh, can you write me some blood simulation? And there's actually OB Fluid. There's someone who wrote the whole system of fluid simulation. There's Final IK. There's, and then Unity itself. There's a lot there to allow you. It has good things and bad things. There's a lot there to allow you very quickly to get an idea off the ground. Where could I start on this? Let me see. Like one thing I knew was that the game would have to be there would have to be a way for collaborators to come in and bring things without them having to be inside Unity, because, right, the prototype I showed before was already there was already a ton of programming that was made by myself, that bringing other people in would make it pretty complex for such a small project. So I tried to design things that people could come in but not having to even touch Unity. So one of the major things that I'm actually going to jump into the dialogue system was, right, this thing that I had going, it got to a point that it just didn't work out. And so I split it into 2 systems. There was one system for conversations. So there's like 11 documents that split like here, like if the cop talks with the wife, if the cop talks with the player. So I got these groups. For example, these are all the conversations that you can start directly with the wife, and I decided to let's organize them in a document that I can read and I can zoom in and out and it makes sense. Like here, for example, are all the conversations about the loop with the wife. This is the beginning of those conversations, and then you can see the branching, and then how can I get the engine to read this, right? And once again, like, super easy. Unity, XML import. I found how to import those things, and then suddenly I was literally writing dialogues here and then those dialogues would get imported straight into the engine, and I could write. I can change a line here. I save the file. I would go into Unity, and I would import that through like I have like a little build manager here. I just do build all content, and I would get the lines into the game immediately. So I try to do things this way. Like every time something gets extremely complex, I would try to find a way to simplify it. But the basis, let me open this. Like, so the basic start of the game was probably this navigation, right? There was the nav mesh, getting a nav mesh for characters to move around. I kept the whole game in one single plane, right? There's no going up and down, there's no stairs. Navigation system in Unity is pretty straightforward. You know, you get points, the characters move between those points. And then, yeah, there was building the collision, and kind of like 80% of what you do around, right, is cameras, looking around, yeah, and then the other big thing was, so I had characters moving, I had time going through, I had these conversations, like I said about the knowledge, right? So I like the big thing about knowledge was that I realized is the knowledge of every conversation you have with someone. There's the part of the first time you have the conversation, which let's say it's this box, then the second time you have the same conversation, and then when you have the same conversation again, but you know something else. So for example, you can talk to the wife that you're living the same day once you know that you're in a time loop, and this is the first time you start the conversation, and once the wife knows that you're living the same day, this conversation is no longer existing. You remove this conversation because she believes you're living the same day, you no longer leave this conversation. So you'd have, right, you have the first time you speak with her, and then the next time you speak with her, where he's, like I realized, right, the character has to be faster at saying the things he said before, because it's better for the player, and also shows progression that he knows what he's talking about. But then once, for example, the wife knows that the cop is coming, like imagine you tell her there's a cop coming, and then you tell her that you're stuck in the same day, she needs to be able to acknowledge, whoa, there's a cop and a time loop. So I had this nice organization of each column is the same conversation with different knowledge from the characters. And as you go down, as you go down, it's the same conversation with the same knowledge, but you yourself have already gone through this conversation. And then, right, there's branching, there's knowledge that changes, and here you can see, like, this was the cool thing. By having my own data, I could, right, I could paint the nodes and say, look, this is a text line, it's the wife that's saying it, and this one is knowledge, you know. So if you tell the wife you're stuck in a time loop, then she's gonna know you're stuck in a time loop, and this is the knowledge. And the whole game started to be around this knowledge.
So then how did you, like, so you were able to work, you know, in this type of like graph editor, you know, and then you were able to bring the data from there directly into Unity, right?
Yes.
And you like coded directly into it.
Yeah, so on the Unity side of things, yeah, there was an importer that would load all this. So early on, I was just looking at the code and playing the game, and hoping that the things that I coded were looking the way they were supposed to. Look. But then I just, right. Actually, I could go over even the whole scene layout, right? Like once I know how scenes work in Unity and how things are laid out, right? There's this. Let me get this here. Right, like first, like making things in, loading the different levels, like realizing that I was building a scene made out of, like, there's the static stuff, right? It's things that will never change no matter what the, let me close the navigation tab. Yeah, like there's the world that never changes, and then there's the world that's dynamic. So having different scenes, there's the main menu. The main menu is, right, is that clock. Let me go there. Menu clock, it's hidden. So right, this is the clock that we see in the world. The clock is the only level that never gets unloaded, and then can be used as transition between levels that get loaded or not. But this game doesn't even have that difficulty because it was always the same environment. So the first thing, I had this debug menu, which I guess was everything that I would do too many times, I would put something here, right? So here I always select the characters, right? Oh, I want to see where a character is. I could press the root for the player. I press F, right? And immediately I'm where the player is. Or here is where the wife starts her level, and I could immediately, right, see the model. And then once the game is running, I could, I could go into their inventory, the animation, and then like all the objects in the world. Like if I want to look for something, I want to look for, like I realized, right, you need categories for things. When I learned how to use classes and organizing things. So this was for a long time. This was like my go-to for everything that's happening in the world. Like for example, like okay, I need lights. I need a light system. So like I can, like let me turn off this gizmo. Like I can turn the lights off in each room in real time. So yeah, so this was another thing. Unity had the real-time global illumination system, and I'm like, I think this would be really cool if all the lighting is dynamic, especially because there's a short amount of time. So there was this process of, getting lights to work, being able to turn the lights on and off, so I can tweak their values. When there's a storm, how does the lighting look when the thunder happens? Then there's rain, and so this is an interesting one. For example, when you pause the game, you get that VHS effect, which was also a plugin from the asset store. I was like, oh, I want a VHS effect. I'm sure someone already had this need, and literally there was
effects, yeah.
Yeah, so there was a really good one, and let me see, I wrote it down here, VHS Pro.
Nice.
And I used it. It was very well written, very well documented. And then I see that the creator of this plugin is on Twitter, and he's very active, and he does a ton of stuff. So I start chatting with him because I had some issues with this plugin. And then I was like, hey, actually, I need rain on the windows. And then I went to look for the Unity store for plugins of rain, but every rain plugin also has storms and clouds, and I just need really good looking rain on the window. Can you do that for me? So I started to talk with him. We became buddies, and so we programmed the rain on the window. So like now we have a rain system. I'm like, oh, we could put this on the store, and I'm talking.
Some networking through the asset store. I like that.
Yeah, there was a connection built. So when there's medium rain, then there's high rain. But this is not moving because we're in the editor. But yeah, like so he wrote a rain system that progressively increases. You get like some fog on the windows.
So this is a shader, like a surface shader?
Exactly. It's just a shader that's custom designed for 12 minutes. I mean, it was pretty straightforward.
So at this point in the process, are you full-time right now, or are these steps still happening while you're working part-time on the game?
Yeah, so I jumped quite a few steps. Okay. So before all this, right, it was me full-time, right? So once I got the funding, the Witness was wrapped up, Jonathan Blow was starting a new project. I was like, now it's time to start this game. I had the funding, I had, like, so another thing is I go to GDC every year. Like if there's developers in the chat, like GDC and any conference where developers go to is like, that's gold, because you meet everyone that's doing things as you. So as I was looking for publishers, I was also talking with developers about doing your own indie game and all the challenges you run into. Like for example, I knew with Xbox we would be releasing on their platform as well as Windows. So suddenly there's all this porting process that has to happen. And there's developers that focus just on porting. I knew I had to do animation. And early on, like from all the games I've worked on, keyframe animation is very time consuming. In the sense that like if I want someone sitting on the couch or someone eating a meal and you want a certain vibe to it, maybe you can do motion capture, but I've never done motion capture. I'm a 3D artist. But suddenly I meet people who are experts in motion capture and we're having these conversations. And then there was a friend I used to work at Rockstar who opened his own MOCAP studio. And then, oh yeah, how much does it cost to do MOCAP? Oh, it costs this. Oh great, I'm looking for a publisher. Now I can, So by meeting other industry peers, I could realize the real costs of doing motion capture. I already do the art costs, but some like hiring someone to do shaders, hiring someone to help you with IK, like talking with sound designers, right? You go to GDC, you can meet 100 sound designers in 3 days, know exactly what they do, how good are they at their thing. and even understand the cost of working with them. So I could slowly build a production schedule, a realistic production schedule, and fill the gaps of the things I didn't know.
Yeah, and like Unity too, we have like a massive presence at GDC, and it's mostly for our developer community. We're super focused on our indie developer community when we go to places like GDC, and it's to like highlight your work, let you talk about this content, share with other people, but mostly so that you can make connections, leveraging our very large network as well with publishers and things like that. You mentioned something really quickly about you were able to like start figuring out your production timelines, and you were able to hire this person and that. So we often talk about the fact that you are like a solo dev, but actually like there's quite a few people that help you, and the history of the team size kind of fluctuated over time. We'd love to know more about that actually.
Yeah. So just before that, like something you mentioned about Unity, like when I had the idea about 12 minutes, Unity was 2 years old, I think. Steam had just started. And if you wanted to do a game, you needed to write a game engine. Like there was no other way around that. Even Steam, you only had, I think the store at Steam only had the Valve products. And it's funny because for many years, I was always like, who's going to write a game engine for the game I want to do? And then suddenly you have Unity, right? Literally, like you just jump in and you can prototype like being a photographer because your phone has a camera. It allows you this whole world to do things that it was great. Like I don't think I would have been able to do 12 minutes if I had to learn how to write a game. I don't think I would have done the game, period. But going back to that, yeah. So I knew I didn't want to get pigeonholed in opening a studio, having these people full time, and then maybe a sound designer is not needed for 5 years of the project, or a 3D artist for a game that has 3 characters. Like unless I get someone who can do all the art, they would also have to be doing, they would have to jump into technical things, because if you're paying someone a full-time salary. So early on I was like, I think I'm just gonna have freelance experts for every department. So I got someone to do the apartment. He came in, modeled the apartment. As he was modeling the apartment, right, these questions came in. What's the time period? How should the apartment look like? And going with the minimalist thing, I wanted to remove anything that would distract you for what the game is trying to say. So I removed the clocks, I removed the names of the characters, I removed the year that it's happening, the day. So the apartment design also went into this direction. And what happened there was interesting, because I didn't know what I wanted the apartment to look like. And an artist usually hire him as like, I want this, this, and this. But there was this iteration process of he would make something, I wanted to keep changing it. So people would really come in and out. Like he would come in, he would design an apartment, he would leave the project. And then maybe a year later, I'm like, I know better what we need. Can you come back in and do these changes? So same with the characters. Like the trailer that we showed at the start, the wife character, she was redesigned completely from that trailer. She does no longer looks the same. So people would come in like sound design and music. We were always talking, because there was a slow evolution of the sound design and the music. Like with the sound design, we were like, we want the player to understand the passage of time. So how can we do that? Maybe there can be a narrative where you can hear the neighbors talking, maybe someone else comes home. As the rain comes in, we feel the aggressivity of the storm. Maybe the storm can match the arrival of the police officer, so we get this ambience going in, or so those departments were coming in and out as freelance. Then we had the MOCAP. There was early on a lot of recording MOCAP, then hiring a team of animators to process this data so I could put it back into the game, and then writing tools for this. And then later on was bringing, then when we realized we were going to have actors, the whole process of, because the game was not designed, as you saw in the early prototype, to have any voice acting. I never thought we'd have voice acting. It was all being dialogue balloons, so rewriting things to allow for voice acting and changing things to allow the voice acting to tell a lot of things that were being told in different ways.
Did you have any difficulty, when working with these contractors? You said you would work with them for a bit, and then you take some time, and then you'd bring them back on the project. How did you guarantee that they would be available down the line and not like too busy to come back? And I feel like that's like a bit of a challenge, right? Because
that's a huge challenge. I think there was So something I like, if you're gonna ask me at the end, what is a big lesson about game development or independent development, I think it's being comfortable in the unknown. I think, but right, having the time and the money to be uncomfortable. And I didn't have an answer for that. Like I knew that at this point, like there was a moment that I need the apartment to have a personality. Even if it's not the personality I want it to be at the end, I will know that's not the right personality because we already have something there that is not doing what it's supposed to do. So, like in this case of the artist that worked for the game, he was working full time in other games. So he was doing this little, like that's the other thing. Like for example, I was very like if I needed a chair, he could take 3 months to make a chair. It didn't have to be made in a week because I was still developing the game at the same time. So there was a lot of room for the freelance people to work on a weekend they have time, or maybe a day that they're taking off, or an evening. They weren't pressured, so that way they could come in and out of the project without having to, like no one was engaged for 6 months full time, and now I mean, for stuff like motion capture, yes, right, I would have to get the studio, get the actors, record everything, and then once we had like 1,000 animations to process, I engage, right, an animator who, like, if an animation takes 3 days, we can multiply this for how long it's going to take, and we need you full time for 6 months. But everyone else could just come in and out very easily, and I would adapt to their schedules.
And out of curiosity, like, so how did you work with the, like, you're dealing with a lot of people, a lot of files, there's scripts, there's all these things, like on the back end, how did you deal with, like, you know, version controls, revisions, all the massive amount of game data?
Yeah. So that's great. So I've always been kind of a freak in terms of organization. And I remember the first thing I wanted to do at Rockstar was learning all the tools the producer uses to manage the project. Because every time someone asks you to crunch, I'm like, if we have to crunch, it means somewhere on this organization someone didn't manage their time correctly, and now I'm the one suffering for that. So the first step was so I'm pretty comfortable with organizational tools, you know, like on the base, right, we use Dropbox. Like, I don't know the level of knowledge on the people that will be listening to this, so I don't know how deep I should go, but right, there's on game development you have raw data, which is like your Photoshop files, your ZBrush, high resolution, you know, models for the characters, like all the stuff that's really heavy, and then you have the actual things that make the game. So if you make a character, right, you have someone doing textures in Photoshop, super high resolution, you have a model with 1 million polygons, but then you make this exported FBX 3D model that you import into the game engine, and that's what actually is in the game, a very light file. So you organize the files differently. The heavy files would go on Dropbox. They would have their own, like, you would save like a max file or a Maya file with version 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, because Dropbox doesn't matter the amount of size, it's there. And then we would get a repository for things that go under revision control, you know, like the code, all the Unity files, and any asset that Unity is reading, or even those flowcharts that I showed. So then I would just give specific, so for like if a 3D artist would come into the project, I would share the Dropbox raw data folder with him. He could make all his work inside Dropbox, so like if his computer dies, the work is there until the moment that a computer died, his Max file, his Photoshop file. Then once he's done, I would actually go into Max and export his file as an FBX and put it in the revision control. And then later on I was like, actually you can do that yourself. Or I would, depends how involved if someone was really involved, I would say like, here's a copy of the Unity scene so you can see your mesh in-game. But that's the other thing, like with Unity, I was using the default PBR pipeline. So he could open the mesh in Unity without having my Unity project, because the whole world is kind of the same. So if it looks good in his Unity, and nowadays like everything is like, if you use not Marmoset, there's the Substance. If you use Substance, there's prefabs in Substance that emulate the Unity PBR pipeline. So we would make sure that the way it looks on Substance Painter would look the same as the game, so he could test the models before I import them into the engine, and I could export the light probes from Unity and give them to him so he could see the day and night cycles in Substance Painter, so it just gives me the files. So I try to keep everything very compartmentalized, where like even the 3D artist, the character artist never met the environment artist, and they could be even in different countries, in different time zones, which was great. Like, and there's also this discovery of the art style of the game, where I didn't know how I wanted the game to look, so I could hire an artist in China that made an art style for the character. Doesn't quite work, and then I can hire someone with a completely different set of skills to do a different character, and then I can judge which one is working better, and then go from there without having someone full-time and then actually want the game to be pixel art, but none of you knows how to do pixel art, and we have to hire a brand new team. And then I found out Airtable through a friend, which was I can actually share the animation. Let me share a whole pipeline of something. So for example, for animation, we used Airtable, and then we ended up using it for music, sound effects, reviewing dialogues. Once we had the actors, we had to review all the lines that were recorded, choose the lines. Like if you do a session with an actor and you have 10 takes, I have to pick up the take, and that take has to be cleaned up. So we started to use Airtable for organizing things. So
for those who don't know Airtable, if you guys like spreadsheet, and I know a lot of producers out there love spreadsheet, this is like this is spreadsheets on steroids.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, I think the biggest thing of Airtable is that you put the things in here and then you can filter them, right? I can filter by any animation that, whatever status it is, and then it reshuffles your table just for that. And you can have a table that's filtered for a bunch of people that don't have to see all the things in the table. So for example, this is all the animation that is left to do. I mean, it's already been done because the game is out, but I could see the status of the sound effects, the animation status, the some notes, like for example, eat, start, spoon table, like starting to eat a food on the table. I could see, here it's the MOCAP file for it, how many frames we have on that animation, what's the pivot in the game world, what's the animation that comes before and after, whether it's MOCAPed or if it was keyframe. Like 90% of the game is MOCAP. And then so the animator that was hired would get a folder with all the MOCAP data. He would work on that file. He would put it on his Dropbox folder. I could even show that actually. Let me go here so I don't show anything I shouldn't. No, maybe that's just boring. Yeah, that'll be a folder with all the FBXs from the animators, and then I could take a screenshot of the world, and show them, like for example here. If possible, have the wrist more rotated so the hand snap spoon matches, and I can put a picture, so you see like, oh, I want the hand to rotate a bit more. Right now the palm is too high in relation to the spoon. So Airtable was used to filter through the animations. We would use, for example, if I go dog session, so for a mocap session we would reference these. Actually, I have some things that I could show, because I think I'm jumping a little bit. Like if we go a little bit back, like remember that prototype that I showed that looked
the giant bomb.
So the game looked like this, right? The game looked like this. I had like some very basic tools in it, and I'm going to go over all the tools once we go into the game being more fleshed out, because it will be easier. The question was, how do I want the world to look? Like, how do I go from this to the final game? And that's where you get a concept artist. Like a concept artist, he looked at this. We spoke about, how I wanted the game to look like. And there were things that I knew would be problems later in development. Like one of them is facial animation, right? Facial animation is a lot of work. It never looks that good. You have to do syncing. You have to have expressions. I'm like, but if we're top down, we don't have to do any of that. So I don't have to deal with that as a developer. So trying to see what are the things I had to deal with and figuring out how a game looks is literally I took a screenshot of the world, I sent it to a concept artist, and he just did a paint over of a screenshot. Right? This was literally a screenshot that looked, let me get a screenshot like this, and then he just did a paint over, right? And a lot of questions start to come in, like about like what's important is what's happening inside the floor. the walls are almost a frame to the picture that's what's inside the wall. So suddenly we're having conversations about the colors of items, like if the knife is interactive, you have to pop out. If the radio is interactive, it has to pop out, so it has to be framed maybe on a white background. The soup, maybe let's get some detail in the soup so you know it's interactive, right? So you're not pixel hunting about what are the elements you want to use in the world. So just hiring someone to do a concept art, like, it was huge. It was a big understanding of what it's going to be to take this into a final game. And then once I know this, right, I can go into the 3D artist, and that's what happened. Then I was like, now let's get a 3D artist who's going to start kind of figuring out how to make a stylized world. So the reason for the stylization that I wanted to go for was, the goal was, if you kind of like if you close your eyes a little bit and everything is out of focus, it has to look real. But if you open your eyes clearly, there's brush strokes, it's an indie game, right? There's no attempt. The realism will come out of the real-time global illuminations, the way the characters move. That's what's going to ground the world. And everything has a scale, the way things react. That's where the realism will come from. Everything else will almost be as sketch as possible, so it's not so it's easier for production. It's less money that's being spent, right? Because there's no team. That's just me gluing all these things together, and visual development takes a long time and money, so cutting on all that. So this kind of informed, so I could go into a 3D artist, right? And I was like, look, we have this couch, this was the end result of the couch. Like, how do we make a couch for the game? It has to be realistic, which means we need some folds, but we don't want to be doing every single fold. Could be some brush strokes that simulate folds. You know where the lighting is coming from. So we did some visual tests. It's like early on, like, how would a painterly door look like? And I guess I could go, like, one of the big influences for the game, like, once I knew I wanted to go painterly, was like, what does painterly look like? So looking at a lot of painters, a lot of projects that have used painterly looks, and kind of see what would fit for 12 minutes. And the answer was like if you look at this image, like, there's some issues here. Like, you need to know there's a room here, but this vent is standing out a lot more than this room. It's important to feel what the wife is doing, but this clock and this painting are totally stealing your eyes are moving around these objects versus what's actually happening in the world. So it's like, okay, we need to mute the colors in the world. So suddenly, like, the walls need to be pretty dark. We can use the wood framing, right, almost to outline the rooms you can go into, so let's keep the doors brighter than the world. The vents, you're gonna figure out there are vents, so let's just keep them like on a third level of importance. And same with the closet, like, you're gonna figure out there's a closet, but it's more important to know there are other rooms. So suddenly you start to have this color composition defining the importance of things. So yeah, there were some visual tests, like, this kind of looks like what's final, but this was pretty big for us, where he was doing like some big blocky shapes, and you could get what the objects are. You don't need more than this. We don't need to be modeling. There's barely any normal maps in the game. It's mostly done through geometry and lighting, because like lighting, right, with real-time global illumination, you get the different surface properties, and then you can get, right, like, you can get the reflectivity working, and if the values match the real-world values, things just go work, and that's a big thing in Unity, right? It's very, very quickly we could be talking about these things not in an abstract level, but looking at the world and seeing them, how they react. And like, even the lighting, what I was showing before, right? I can scroll through the lighting if I turn the lights off, right? I can scroll through the lighting in the world in real time, so we can see all these conversations. They could happen in real time. Like, there was no abstract. Like, there was literally, even in the previous version of the world, I could see, like, at the end of the day, maybe there's a neon that turns on outside. So, because I know the cop will be here, because I already solved all these design problems. I know you're gonna electrocute a dude here on the floor. So we need some lighting to convey this stressful moment. Let's go with reds. So how do we get the reds in? And how do we go from maybe a colder room at the start of the loop. So all these answers could be prototyped. So there was these early art tests, and there was like looking at lighting too. Like I started to look at films. Like once I knew, like at this point, right, we had the story written, we have this strong narrative element, all the pacing and everything. So I started to look at how some directors deal with lighting and decoration and set design to try to solve, right, the issues that I was just showing. If I'm gonna share my screen, like a director that's a big influence for me is Fincher. Like the way he does lighting. Like use an example from Seven, and the muted color palette. Like it hit a lot of notes of what I was looking for about, you know. And he has a lot of like little lights here and there. And there's a timeless, like this building is like Victorian era looking, but you don't know quite well the year, and how some colors are muted, right? But then there's some bright spots that you can clearly where your eye gets driven into. So I was like, how can I apply some of these principles into my situation? There's another example, Gone Girl, where he has these small focused lights to draw your eye into, where he has these small focal points, and everything is very soft, which I really like. And I think it would contrast well with the sharp concept brushstroke. Like hopefully it will feel like a painting in a way. So with that in mind, I started to slowly try to right, go into each room and try to tweak them. So this is how the bathroom looked on that old prototype. Right, there's already some things I'm trying to, like there's a light here because there was a mirror in the bathroom for a long time. So trying to pay attention to the cabinet, get the light to focus here. So trying to see, like also each room to have its own personality based on the importance throughout the story. So this was early on where I was playing with all the elements before realizing, you know, the walls, what's important is the floor. You see, like here the player, the most important element in the game is the one that reads the less. Like I'll be looking at the walls more than the room. So very quickly, everything that's not on the floor needs to be darker than what's inside. Here I was still playing with it, and then like eventually, oh, here we go. Now I have a frame made out of the tiles. Suddenly your eyes are drawn into the room. I can use it. And also, I don't know if you notice, a big change was also the camera field of view. Like by changing the FOV, we get a much bigger depth. Like the walls especially are very compressed in this version, and then they stand out more. And then, right, like this was like my final test before we went into, right, let me jump into Unity, into the final one, right, where not only I got the lighting to, like I got a bit stronger fall off around the lighting. You got the painterly brush strokes, and actually I'm gonna do, and then mute some colors so that things will pop out naturally. And in this case, I also had to look into account how this would look in, right, when the lights are off. So in this case, like a strong blue light from the window that's gonna bounce off the door, and you can still see the shape. So for example, right, in this version, like I quickly saw that if the toilet seat is wood, it helps pop out in the dark with the bright of the tiles, and it just reads better. Same with the bedroom. Like bedroom here is just like purely mechanical. You have a bed to sleep. You have the couch corner so that the wife doesn't see you if you're in the living room. You have the drawer. The other thing was, how do I make this feel like a realistic room without putting, like, there's no closet, there's a lot of things missing what a normal room would have. So first figuring out what colors the room would have, and then like, so this was an asset store element. Like this is, for as long as I could, I would always go into the asset store, and there's one architectural visualization package. So I got a bed, I got a ton of elements, right? I changed the textures and the materials towards what I'm looking for, but it allows me to very quickly.
Are those the ones you used in the final game, or did
No.
you swap them out at the end?
Then we had a modeler do a custom version. Like for example, the issue with this one, right? If someone lays down, their body would crumple here on the corner. How the pillows are too up, and they're too realistic, right? I wanted this painterly look, so we ended up. So we modeled a realistic bed, and right once now here the colors were starting to come into place. But then right on the final version we then stylized the folds so they feel like a painting. So there's a painterly aspect to it, but if I go into the normal look, right, they were actually modeled, and then like we kind of push the angles on it, so then the colors go along with it, and feels like, right, the albedo has this brush stroke look, and then everything all together kind of with lighting, I think feels like brush strokes, hopefully, that go along with the floor.
I like you mentioned the painterly aspect as like an aesthetic choice, but it's also a through line throughout the game, right? Like there's the paintings that you really want to pay attention to. The fact that the game looks like a painting itself. You're looking down like these little vignettes or very well like curated pieces of elements.
Yeah. I that's the thing. Like, yeah, things. It's almost like I really believe in this. Like, I think when you build something and it gets to a certain complexity, in game development for sure, this thing that you're doing gets a life of its own, and then it starts talking to you if you listen to it. And sometimes there were directions I wanted to take that I would implement them, and you kind of see they just don't flow well, while others, like the top down, it clearly was telling me stick with the top down. Same with the painterly look. Like once we implemented it, it just made sense. And like you're saying, like even later on, like the office scene, like the big spoiler, right, when you go on the flashback, it's more real in terms of the way it's modeled and texture than the apartment. There's a less of a painterly nature to it, so it hopefully conveys, right, some of the things that the game is trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's gonna get very philosophical for a second, but actually, like, I love that you said that it speaks to you. I like the new school philosophy and like design and things like that is like all the things that you create and you design, these objects have some sort of like vibrancy, we call it, and it's this like very deep like thing theory about, you know, you have to kind of like give life to all the objects you create. And as you know, I went through design and art school, and oftentimes your teacher would break down your work and it's like, why did you make this stylistic choice, or why did you add this object? If you don't have a really good reason for it, then you shouldn't have been there.
Exactly, I agree. I think that's, and I would even say, like, the thing I was saying about being comfortable with the unknown is because sometimes, yeah, I remember in art school, you'd have an assignment and you'd be paralyzed. Where do I start? Because I don't know where I want to be at. And I think for me, it's just, I just do something that I know it's not the right thing, but suddenly you know what you don't want. And by that process of elimination, it slowly gets there.
Yeah, I totally agree that it's a process of elimination. Like, I remember this, I do this exercise a lot, and I recommend this to people who are doing game jams, maybe not doing game jams, but iterating on games. Think of your first 10 ideas for your game or your concept, and then throw them all away and use the 11th one. So that's how I usually go about doing this.
And I even say, like, sometimes to arrive at the 11th one, you need to implement the number 9 and 10 and realize why they're not, I don't know. I see it's very iterative. Like, there's answers I don't know I'm going to arrive at them at all. And yeah, going back to this, so this is the bed, and the last one was the living room. And I really want to say, like, the field of view, it's crazy how before everything was a lot more crunched and had more of a cartoony feeling to it. And this is the other thing with art, where once, like, there's a huge difference from the box art, the prototype assets, to the final one. The scale changes completely, I think. Like, just, so this was me playing with the lighting, like that image that I showed before of, right, how they have these lamps around. I was trying to do that, but the issue is when you're top down, once you have a super strong light source, that's all you're going to be looking at. Even though if this camera was down in 3D, I think it would look pretty cool, but it just doesn't work that way. And I was also trying to figure out, right, the values that everything should have so your eye looks at the things. Here's another idea that, right, this is a mess. And then slowly muting the whole world. And then muting the world would also fit a bit with, because you want to be uncomfortable a bit in this game, right? There's this feeling of some things are not quite right. This is their home and their privacy, but it's not quite there. There's also another element was I was trying to make things as dynamic as possible, and I'm going to show that in Unity in a bit. But like bringing organic shapes, like I really like this tablecloth here, even though it was too noisy and it would affect the animation. But then I was like, oh, let's put some curtains here, and like contrasting, you know, like hard shapes with soft ones. Also, I was like, oh, let's get some nature in it. Yeah, until we went to the final version of.
It's kind of incredible listening to an artist talk about how they design a level versus how a level designer talks about
I mean,
it.
there were some level design things that I'm actually not even mentioning here, right? Like one of the big things was so working on the Witness, there was so Jonathan Blow, right? He would prototype a level, and then we would have real world architects, like literally they would say like, can you make a building out of these weird shapes we have going on? And they would go in and say, look, there's actually a building in Italy that was designed to cut wood of which kind of looks like these weird shapes you made. We could make that narrative out of it. And then the whole process of art development is very tied to design. But in this case, like design-wise, there were things like once I knew the elements, like if I'm going to share the screen again, like looking at this image, right? I knew what the elements were. Like the wife needs to be sitting and doing an activity, so it would be a couch, and you're going to have a meal with the wife, so you need a place to eat the meal and a place you get the things for the meal from. But this image, for example, I think it's working in terms of design, but it doesn't feel very like if you're reading a book and you're looking at the fridge, it's not that it doesn't look like a pleasant layout for a house, or there's no romantic element to here, and we need a romantic element to be pulled off because you have that beat of showing the present, and they're having this romantic dinner. Like there's a clear path of having a perfect day with the wife versus all the torture and horrible things that happen with the cop. So design, there's a narrative importance to this, and having this next to the window wasn't working. So that's why I was like, oh, let's move it to the top. Suddenly having the dinner table in front of the couch just cleaned up, and then we have all the kitchen appliance stuff all stuck in a corner. So design wise, it was a lot of having the elements and moving them around. Like another one I was mentioning was like the wife, right? The wife is reading here, and if you play with the lights, she runs to the bedroom to read because you're pissing her off. And this is like to clue you in that the light switch is something that that is important. That's another element. Like some of the light switch, like I'm just gonna go on that tangent. No one would find the light switch when the game was originally started. So then I was like, let's have the wife read a book. And if you turn the light off, she's gonna complain about the light, and then you want to be playing with the lights. So then she goes into the bedroom, and she reads in the bedroom. Let me go to the actual game. Right, she goes to read into the bedroom, and then she's in the bedroom, and players will want to play with the light, but no one wants to play the light when she's reading in the bedroom. So I was like, oh, so let's make a light switch that's like clearly broken, right? Like the model, you can see it's super broken, but people still don't get that the light switch is broken. Then I was like, okay, what if the light switch is off, and when the wife goes into the bedroom and it turns it on, we get some sparks, and if she says something about it. So there was this, I think it's very interesting, like I knew about the puzzle with the light switch very early on, but the nuance of how in your face it should be and how much room there is to play with this, right? Just before release, the bedroom light was starting on, but we realized that if it starts off, if you just do the dinner with the wife, she goes in the bedroom to get the present, she turns the light on, we get the sparks, and you immediately know that there's something on going with the light switch, which you're gonna forget after a ton of thing happens, but then later on, it's gonna stay there in the corner of your mind when you're driving, right? And you're like, wait a second, the light switch is faulty. I can somehow use that. So design-wise, the design was very much in parallel, I think, with the art. On
that sequence you described of like the wife is reading, and then you turn off the light, and then you see the reaction. That's literally how I experienced it. So the intended design worked perfectly, and then I was like, oh, okay, and there's a light in another room, so let me go.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and earlier you were talking about the couch and how the fridge is in front of the couch. And I think this is something we talk about in a lot of these, when we're talking to a lot of developers, is that a lot of developers come with different backgrounds. You know, they didn't necessarily study game design, and so they come with this like, you know, backgrounds in architecture and screenwriting, and I think these backgrounds really help when it comes to like level design or art direction, because you actually think about things like, oh, you know, you wouldn't be sitting in a house, sitting on a couch, staring at the fridge. You know, even if it works for level design, it doesn't feel right, especially for a game that's very like, it's supposed to have that atmosphere, and you're supposed to get immersed in it, and it's supposed to be believable. These things are very important to watch out for, and the fact that you had the luxury, because the game takes place in like 4 rooms, to really pay attention to all these details and spend all this time on messing with the color of the lid of the toilet
like
seat.
My couch is like
that.
level 5. Is like, each object is like a level. Yeah. Like another one I was gonna say was, if you look back at the image again, like an issue here was that the window is so accessible. It really feels you could peer off the window, do something with the window, and by moving all this stuff here, you suddenly have this wall of stuff that makes the window feel more like background versus I want to jump out the window, or I want to, because everyone wants to leave the apartment very quickly.
That's very interesting, actually. Did you find people were trying to, was there a version where people were prototyping and they were actually trying to climb out the window?
Yeah, I mean, so the big thing on that aspect was the design, like, and you can see actually like in this prototype, right, where when they play, right, you'd have this, I believe I had this to say, like, you can only combine what you already have with you with the world.
Yeah.
Everything else that is not that, you just click on them. So you would know that you click on the couch, he sits, that's it.
Yeah.
The couch, you might combine what you have with the couch, but there's no hidden action with the couch. So once that was clear, the possibilities were there. Like, people wanted to open the oven, put the knife there to get it hot. There were the ideas would be running on their minds, and I think they still do in a lot of players, saying,
yeah,
oh, if this was real world, I could do this. Yeah, for sure, but then I couldn't make a game out of it.
Right.
So limiting, saying like, clearly, look, I know those things, but that's the way they are in this reality. But for example, there's one that I like here in the bathroom. Like, the shower has no purpose, and it really bothers me. And I mean, I ended up to making it like maybe you feel you can hide.
I did. That's what I did. I tried to hide in the shower at one point. I also, at one point, I think you'll find this funny, is that because of the carpet, referencing The Shining, for some reason it got me thinking I need to jump out the bathroom window, because that happens in The Shining. And so I was like, oh,
like,
and it's like
a secret puzzle design.
Yeah,
that would be pretty far-fetched. Yeah.
No, I wasn't thinking that's the reasoning. I think just subconsciously it made me feel like, oh, this is like, this is familiar.
And for a long time, I removed the bathroom. I removed the shower. But for example, the bathroom without the shower just feels off. It never felt like, I think the bedroom survives without a closet or the little side tables, but the bathroom without the shower was never working. So another big thing that I'm gonna go over is like a major change that happened. You see here, when we go into a conversation, I was like, let's make things immersive, where the camera zooms in when someone talks, and when they don't talk, it zooms out into the apartment. And when you move between rooms, let's have him go to another room. Right, instead of snapping into a different room, it just follows you. It follows your movement. Let me get a. I mean, you get the idea. Like the camera, when you go into the bedroom, it will. There's one here. When you get to the bedroom, the camera just keeps following. There was this line of sight. And I don't know what movie I saw. I don't know if it was Villeneuve. Like, Dune is amazing. I just saw it yesterday, but there was some director, like even Kubrick does that on in The Shining. The Shining does it really well, where you have these shots where everything is parallel, and then you have these zoom in shots when you really want to change, you know, the way you feel about the situation that's happening. And I realized this bobbing camera movement that I'm doing, it seems to go against all this cleanliness that I'm going for. Why do I zoom in on a dialogue? I pan when I move around. Do I even need those, right? So I was like, let's take them all out. There's no zooming, there's no panning. Let's keep this locked. And suddenly, them being locked, it became about the movement that's happening inside the frame. Like, now it was about the characters moving and not about the camera moving to follow the characters. And it just grounded everything once again. But the other thing that it did was, if the camera is not moving, we can do more things with the art. And what I was gonna say is like, right, there was a painterly look I was going for, and I'm gonna show it here how it used to look. So this is how kind of the living room was looking. This is the albedo, so like it's just that it's the diffuse textures that are used on the object without any lighting. This is how, right, those tests I was showing before of the trying to get a painterly feeling, right, we were doing this work of trying to get this text, like the idea was almost like someone painting on Photoshop or on a brush doing a painting, and this is kind of how it was looking. But now that the camera was static, I was like, why don't we paint everything as a concept art and then we project it? So I went to look for a concept artist, and he just did like, look, you see this image? Can you do a painting out of it? And so this was the paint over that he did. He incorporated some of the lighting, and suddenly I was like, let's get some narrative into it, because this place has to feel lived in. And I think this one doesn't feel, it still feels very robotic a bit, like. And I was like, let's get, the door opens, you get the wood scratches, there's scratches here, the wood might be more used in certain spots. Let's even get like some purples and some light blues. Let's get the couches used up a bit, but a fine balance. That a lot of games, when something is used, you have these toilets, like the 3D artist that did the first toilet, I was like, I wanted to feel lived in, and it was all dirty. And I'm like, dude, no one has a toilet that dirty. You would clean that. You'd be, especially if you live with someone. If you're single, maybe, but as a couple, there's this grime that we do in games. Exactly, no stains, and they're tight. So he did this paint, and then we just, let's project this into the world, and that's what's there, right? This is literally like, if I put this in albedo, the albedo is getting the deferred albedo, it's here. Yeah. So here it is, right? This is like, this is literally is this painting. Like, this was projected, so it's angled to work at the perspective, but at this angle things get distorted. So yeah, it was just projecting his painting onto the table, onto the floor. The same here, right? This was based on and you can see kind of the brush strokes on the elements. And another one was the clothes, for example, right? We had this was the pass with the 3D artist, like how painterly we could get with the 3D art. And then I said, look, can you do a painting of this? And we want a lot of, it's the wife's underwear, right? I wanted some color, like some like, you're really peering into the intimacy of your wife, where and she likes color, she has a lot of stuff. So he did this painting, and I also have a little video for this. Yeah, so like, here's the 3D model. This is in Studio Max, and then we projected the concept art into the 3D model, and it just looks amazing. And then on top of this, so we did some tests, right? The main thing was how much lighting should the concept art have in order for us to have still the dynamic illumination. But we find a really nice compromise. So look, here's the. So right, there's this is all painted, right? But it's still a 3D model. Like, all this shirt still has all its normal map information and all its 3D details, which means, right, it's gonna get affected by the illumination. So it still works. And if I do like that, I mean, you never see this, like, I mean, if you open it, but it still works, right? We got the best of both worlds. We got the painterly look, and it was very fast to do, right? There's literally, once the 3D artist has done his work and he left the project, I could get the concept artist to paint this, and then I could go in, because I have the 3D background, I could just project the UVs and get the textures in here, and we would get this projection mapping.
I think what was interesting is how the top-down projection mapping actually works, and how it only works because you're looking at it from one angle, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If the camera, you could still have a little bit of tilt perspective, but right, if I go. Right, if you go this angle, you would see that things are just. I mean, I got a 3D artist to clean. So at the end and end of the game, there's this thing that people who develop games know. Like, in the last 3 months, you do an amazing amount of changes that are radical to the end product. And one of them was those ones. Like, we just got someone going to the textures and you know, and paint out some, because with bounce lighting, sometimes if like let's say the orange of the brow was projecting into here, maybe the bounce light would get a lot of orange coloring coming in, so there was a bit of a cleanup, but it was very minimal. It was pretty smooth. Yeah, and I think this is a good segue to lighting.
Well, lighting, yeah, exactly.
So lighting was I had to write some tools. Right, first was understanding Unity limitations. I wanted to use real-time global illumination. It was the way the light bounces, you get this solidity to the world that I think you need for next-gen titles. Like the old days, for those that don't know, right, you'd be putting Omni lights everywhere to simulate bouncing or making like playing with the fall off, but you always get this like before, like old engines, they would not take into account the way a light, right, it loses strength. So two lights, you cannot go past a certain value of lights, and also the way the camera adapts to the white point of a light. And right, when I started to work on this game a long time ago, Unity was bringing those things in. So the PBR pipeline, the real-time global illumination, and the cameras, like the camera, the post-process stack and everything was still, I think, in a stage you had to get it from somewhere else. It wasn't integrated in Unity. But you could look at it like a film, and if you set up correctly like a real camera lens, you'd get the real results. So the main challenge was, like, I realized no light in Unity could be next to a wall, because, right, real-time global illumination does not allow for like, I'm gonna even put this here, right, there's this framer warning, right, where let me get a light that's on. Oh, where is it? Oh, because I have them all off. Anyway, like the bounce lighting is not correctly calculated for, the shadows are not calculated for bounce lighting, which means that if a light is really close, if a light is really close to a wall, and I think this happens on all engines just because of it's very expensive for the real-time global illumination, it bleeds out. So suddenly I have all the lights in the center of each room. I could never have something very close to a wall. These are the exceptions, but these don't really light the room. They're very tiny. So I had to split. Let me turn on the gizmos. So what I ended up doing was, for each light there were two. I just split them. The indirect lighting was a separate light from the direct lighting. So for example, let me go like bedroom. Like this is, so I could play with the fall off, right? That was the main thing, right? So the fall off of the indirect light would not be affecting other rooms or transitions. So the like the bathroom indirect is, oh, let me order this alphabetically. Yeah, there's the bathroom and there's the bathroom indirect, which is slightly smaller. So like the main light would have no indirect multiplier, so which means there would be no issues in terms of incorrect light bleeding from the room. And then the indirect light, right, you see real-time indirect bounce shadowing is not supported for spot and point lights, which are all the lights I use as spot and point lights. So I had to reduce the radius in order for the artifacts you're gonna get of the bounce light not having indirect bounce shadowing could be mitigated. So that's what drove the lights. Each room has a light in the center, because I think otherwise I would have tried to go more towards this kind of lighting, having more light spread out through the room and smaller ones. But I think it worked. It allows for the floor to really shine, and you get this very clear readability. Then I also got, like, a thing that was bothering me was the way shadows are casted in Unity, and then there's a really good programmer that told me that there's some math errors, at least at the time, with the way lighting is calculated. And there's a plugin which called Next Gen Soft Shadows, which does this that I love, right? When a light source is closer to the object, it's sharper, and then you have this nice fall off as it gets further away. And it's all like mathematically correct. It's super expensive, but I only have a room, so I can afford this. So playing with the real-time global illumination limitations, splitting the indirect and direct, and the NGSS shadows, and then the last one was light probes, right? I knew I could not have real-time light probes because it's super expensive, or even having them updated on a regular basis. So I just, right, I split them per like areas where it changes. Like for example, right, there was one just for this area because of the outside lighting. So we get the metal reacting to the thunderstorm and everything.
And these are reflection probes,
reflection
right?
probes. Yeah, exactly. So I baked these. I custom bake each one, right? I wrote a little on the tools. The game was supposed to be called Conundrum for a long time, so the tools are all under Conundrum.
Oh, I never knew that. Okay.
But yeah, the probe manager, where did he go? Yeah, so I have this probe manager who would bake the reflection probe. Let's go to each room, turns the lights on, off, turns the doors on, off, bakes all the light probes, so that then what you can see is that right when like if I select this probe and I turn the bedroom light off, the living room, sorry, right, it swaps probes and there's no cost. We're just swapping a texture. And then there are all these edge cases, right, where doors, right, the doors are super tricky. So each door would have a light probe in the middle, which is just used for the door frames, because right, you can have these two drastic lightings. The door is actually split into two halves, like geometry wise, so that each one have its own separate, like this half is lit by the probe on this side, the other half is lit by the probe on this side. And then I also had some trackers so that when the door opens, right, because when the door opens, this side of the door will be in this room, and now it should listen to this light probe, and you have this priority. If I go to the inspector, where did I put the inspector? Oh, it's here. Like if you have the priority, put it here. Yeah, like I would force the priority of an element as it rotates. Like the priority of the light probe for a surface would not be, you see here, the anchor override. I would have an anchor override for the door so that when it opens, it forces it to use the anchor that's close to the new probe when doors are open and closed. I think that's it for the lights. Oh yeah, the last thing was just, yeah, what I showed before was, right, the game is real time. It's actually 10 minutes in the apartment, because then the other 2 minutes are in the flashback. So I made a timeline for the 10 minutes where I could jump to specific moments. So
yeah,
I define, like, you know, when...
I love seeing the bedroom with the timeline because it really changes dramatically.
Yeah. So I tried to get each room to have a bit of a narrative to it, as much as it was possible. So let's turn all these off. So the one in the living room is that we start with like these browns that it's end of the day, and then we go into the blues as the storm gets more intense.
And then that soft lighting right there at the end is just, I think, really beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just pleasant to look at. The bathroom was pretty simple. I think it just gets. I don't think it even has any change anymore. Yeah, I think this light gets maybe slightly strong, and then the bedroom, right, is whether you're with the wife in the bed kissing, or whether the cop is interrogated, we go into these red colors. Yeah, and then there was these tools. Like the other thing is, like when you open a game window, right, you only see you see whatever the main camera has been defined by whatever scenes you have open. But like, let's say I want to see how this looks in the game, so I had this little tool that would spawn a camera base. Let's say I'm in the kitchen, I do create, and now the game window has the exact camera of the game, and I can go, let's go to the bathroom. So then I could do my work focused on the room that I'm in. Or if I was trying to work on like a first person camera, let's say I want to see how you look from the closet, right? I could select these little camera gizmos and actually come here and do spawn a camera from the reference. So then it would spawn, let me get the closet cam, I think it's this one. Yeah, I would do spawn camera from camera reference, and it would give me the camera from that viewpoint. So I would use this a lot to play with the cameras and the lighting. Yeah, and I think it would be a good idea maybe to go over the tools. Since
Yeah.
the lighting integrates into that.
Yeah, and as part of the tools, we're going to talk about, I guess, yes, some of your tools that relate to lighting, but then also something that's super important to the game is like animation and animation tools, and how you like tested all the animations throughout in the different scenes, right? Because the same thing can happen in different rooms, and you need to test that and make sure that characters are not clipping into the environment, and you have tools to help you do that, right?
Yeah, so actually the animation tool was written halfway through the animation process. So for a while, the artist would do the animations, and I would play the game to see the animations, which is like, it's ridiculous. So for example, if you're, I don't know, if the cop was throwing you on the floor, right, he can do it from sitting on the left side of the couch, the right side of the couch, whether you're eating on one side of the table. It doesn't matter where you are, there's a custom animation for each one of them. And I would be playing the game to see these animations, and it became apparent that that was just not feasible for the amount of animations we had, and there were a lot of errors that I wasn't catching. So I'm going to show first the animator. Let's go over the animation system. Let's go on the scene first. So the way the game works is that every time two characters interact, they have to be half a meter from each other and facing each other. And then whatever the animation is happens. So the first step was learning how to use the animator and organize it. This was also a big spaghetti thing that I kept organizing until I got some nice categories. Like
sorry, that gave me a little bit of anxiety.
They all look like this, Carol. They all look like this. Don't worry, it's not just this project.
Yeah, I mean, I could have some suggestions of how to improve some things. For example, locomotion, you have the walk cycle, and the walk cycle you have the when you walk and you stop. When you stop, you can stop in any direction. So if you stop 45 degrees, then you have what's the footstep when you stop, right? And this is how I would test an animation. I would, let me glue the inspector here, right? I would have my animation editor, so the animator would deliver me his animation, and I would play it here. Looks fine. And for walking, you can kind of test it in the game. But for more other things, like let's say, for example, like the cop beating you up. Let's say beating you up, like he can beat you up when you're standing, when you're in the closet, when you're handcuffed. And if I open the hand, for example, the closet, he's beating you up when you're in the closet. Right, he grabs you, he takes you out of the closet, like there's a kick there, and then he knocks you out. This is extremely vague, right? I cannot see this in context. Is he clipping with the environment? And I can go play this in the game, but let's say I want to review, right, the punch that he's giving to the other. I'm not even seeing the other character, and there's no way that I know of having two animations in the preview editor and seeing them how they work. And then you might want to pause, you might want to zoom in. What about the animation, the audio that's going with it? So I was like, okay, I need to write something for this. So I wrote the animation preview, and I'm gonna load it. Before it was loading when I opened Unity, but it actually needs to go through every single animation clip and stack them all together into like a list so I can access them, which was really slowing down Unity. So it needs to be initialized now before you play it. But what it does, once it's loaded, I learned a lot about the animation. Actually, I don't know if you guys knew this, like while I was working in this, I had a lot of issues with animation editor, like issues in the sense of I don't know quite well how it works because I'm not an animator, and right, it's designed with a certain way of working in mind that I don't know how that way of working is. So I would talk with other animators, like stuff like understanding, like this is crazy, like, but if you go here, like, right, you have an exit time, and you have is it better to be fixed duration or not when you exit animation? I have no idea. What is an ideal transition? Should I do it by percentages or by seconds? I have no idea. There was this lack of understanding that I would go out to documentation, Unity forums, and I eventually actually found the guy who designed the system. And I was able to speak with him directly. He worked for Unity, right? And it was amazing. He explained me a lot of things that I would have never guessed. It helped me understand how the system worked, also the limitations of the system and working around them. And I'm gonna say, like, in terms of limitations, like, I hear a lot of people complaining about game engines, like Unity is not doing this or not doing that. But I think any software that gets too complex will have limitations. It's just the nature of these things. And I think fighting against them is it's a waste of time. Like even Photoshop, like Photoshop doesn't do tileable textures, never did. It took like them 10 years to do, to paint to the edge and they see the paintbrush coming back.
Yeah.
But you can spend a year fighting with Photoshop or just learn to use that to learn to do tileable textures. Maybe you project them in Studio Max and you see them in real time. You know, like you just have to work around them. I think complaining is useless. Just want to say that. So yeah, so he's the animation editor. So how does it work? I load it. It loads the characters. I can choose. Let's say I want the cop, and I want a slave. Okay, let's load 2. Let's load the player. Then I'm going to load a clip. Like this is what it took so long. And the clips, like this is another thing. I'm very freak about organization, and that means naming conventions. They're super important. Like even when you do a texture, let's say you're doing a brick texture. You want to define what type it is, right? You want to also mention something about the color maybe, or the type. Let's say you have wood, floor, dirty, right? You don't want to put the dirty before you put the wood, and you want to put the floor before the wood, because maybe you want to look at everything you have of wood. Like it doesn't apply to this game, but if you're working in GTA and you're texturing something, you have to check that you're not going to make a new texture if it already exists. And the same with animation, you know. So I got a naming convention that was pretty solid, which means when I load, for example, like being beat up by the cop, it automatically loads the animation for the player because it reads the naming convention. So I could incorporate all this into the code. And then I choose where it happens. So I have to choose like he's finding him in the right when sitting at the chair. So I can come here and I can snap them to the chair. I did snap all, right? So now I have the 2 characters snapping in the location. And then when I activate, right now I can scroll to the animation. So it's exactly what we had before, but I'm seeing it in engine, in location, in the environment. And right, I can swap. Let's say it's the wife that's gonna headbutt the player, or right, or it's.
And
the
this is really useful. Like that, you have one rig where you can swap the mesh. You don't have to create a separate rig for every character you have in the game, right?
Yeah, that was to save time, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Like early on, I was like, I wanted to have different sizes. Maybe the copy is bigger and bulkier, but first it's top down. You won't really realize the size difference. And having one rig, like everyone shares animations. Like half of all the walk cycles are shared. Like that's the other thing. I think once the game got the voice actors and got this visibility, like even Hideo Kojima, when he praised it, he compared it to Inside, in the sense that this game does not have the scale of those games at all, right? Literally all the characters use the same walk animations. There just wasn't budget or time to have more. Like everything is shared as much as possible. That's why even some branch, like I was more worried about branching the narrative and having those things happening than more complex things. Like there's no hand animation, right? The hand rig has like maybe 2 bones. The spine has 2 bones. There's no facial rig. So like when a character is dead, they don't close their eyes if you look at it, because there's no. I was like, I could have done maybe some morph targets for the face, but that would take longer. But yeah, going back to the tool, yeah. So not only I could play the animations, so right, I can see them, and you can see here their pivots. I can see if they're perfectly aligned or not. The 0.5 that I mentioned, and I wasn't seeing any of this before. Then I can just play the animation, right? And if I do that along with the camera, I can. Right, if I pause this and I spawn a camera for the where are we for the bedroom. Whoops, I have to delete. Yeah, right now I can literally see how it's going to look in game when I'm not playing the game. And I can see, do they clip with the table? I mean, it's will be the other way around, right? It's the cop that does this to you, but I can see, right, and then we can start tweaking. Oh, is his arm going over here? Like the example I gave of pushing off the closet, the space is very constrained, so trying to make sure no one hits anything and they go through the elements. And then we realized, like, I could extend this further because the sound designer, the way we used, so I'm going to go over a bit of the Unity side of things, right? Like each animation, let's look at a specific animation. Let's say not the beat up, like picking up an object from, right? You can pick up an object from the floor, which was removed, from the table, from a drop surface. Let's say you're picking up an object like from a drop surface, which is like all the counters. Like we have the animation of him picking up, but then I was using, right, the curves. Right, so there's an I key for the right hand, which was manually written, you know, when the I key should make the hand go into the object. But then there was also events. Early on, I started to use events for, you know, as a function that gets called in the code, you know, so when the hand gets the object, it's going to call the snap to hand function, so it snaps to the hand. And then when he puts it back in the pocket, there's another function that snaps the item to the inventory. But then when you have a fight, for example, you want more events, you want sound design. Early on we were designing, we would play a single sound during the fight, but right, that you just don't want to do that for game design. You want to break it up into all the beats of the fight. So the sound designer, I wanted him to be able to play sound effects, you know, like not only the sounds the character is doing, but also the sounds that are happening during the fight. And as you can see, right, once you have a few sounds and your editor is like this, you're like, which one is, if one is happening right after the next one, you're screwed. So I was like, oh, maybe I can do that into the editor. So I got an audio mode, right, that now it shows each character sounds, right? I can see the sounds of each character on the timeline. Like these are the footsteps, these are the sound effects, these are the emotions for each one, and I can even click on them and just play them or change. Oh, instead of a footstep, it's going to be the sound of dropping an object, or if it's the foot, is the foot sliding or left step. And suddenly, right, the sound designer was doing all this. It was no longer me. So this tool was a huge lifesaver. And I can even see the events, all the events for this animation. This was actually huge. Like the event system, being able to get free of this and see the event system, the function that's playing, the sound effect, and then I expanded this into the, where is it? Animation event manager. So I would build an animation event list of every single animation in the game, and then I could filter it. Like, let's say we're looking for an animation that's played by an actor, and it's like all the times that an actor has an emotion. I don't want to, I think I have to put a string here, or every time that blood is coming out from an actor. And then I can click on it, it takes me straight to the file, and then I can edit the file, right? And I can copy this, and I would copy the file name straight to the animation preview. So suddenly I was free from this little window, and I could, right? And all these match the Airtable that I showed before, right? All these names match these names, so suddenly it was very easy for me to be reviewing, right? I could review like 100 files a day. Like if the pivot is slightly offset at idle pose. Oh yeah, I even forgot about that. Like for example, not only that, but like when the player is, let's turn off the audio mode. Like when you're punching him, you need to know the animation that's playing before. So I could choose a start and an end animation. So let's say if he's beating you up, right? Let's do this properly. Like the cop is beating up the player let's change location so it's more fun. Let's say he's beating you up when you're sitting on the left side of the couch, and let's snap them all to the couch. There you go. And yeah, and now I can define like what is he doing before. So if he's handcuffed, I can choose the standing handcuffed, right? So I know the cop is handcuffed before he does this to you, and he tries to fill the gap of what the other character is doing. And the player is going to be sitting down on the left side of the couch. And now I can snap them all to here, right? And now I can see like, so this is the animation before, they're both idle, then the start of the attack, and then the animation at the end. In this case, we don't need the end one because they both get knocked out. But what this does, right, it allows me to see the transition. I could even come here and see the exact transition frame between the two animations, and I can say, you know, like, look, the finger of the character on the first frame of the attack is not matching the last frame of the handcuff. In this case, it seems, yeah, like for example, this was never fixed, but no one notices, right? But both his thumbs are incorrectly keyframed on the beginning of the next animation.
I don't think anyone is working.
Exactly.
I noticed it. I have to say, I know.
I'm gonna
No,
write it in my review, in my Steam review now.
yeah,
There was a point I had to let go
Thumbs
some
down.
things. And there's funny things like that I noticed later on. Like everything was designed around the player, but the wife model, she's thinner. So her hand is floating when she's chilling out on the couch, right? Because her legs are thinner than the player legs.
Game
Which you
breaking.
can see when you're looking from the couch, which is super frustrating. But like I said, like fixing this means I have to hire a new animator,
Yeah.
tell him the problem, fix it on his side, bring it back, import it, and now we would need to branch out animations because we'd have the player and the wife animations. But yeah, so this was the animation tool.
So that's part of the challenge of sharing a rig between meshes, yes? Like these slight discrepancies, maybe? Is that
No, I would say it's more the challenge of pigeonholing myself. Like if I, like for the next project that I'm doing, I want to have, I think you need a couple of people. Like you would need someone, like if it's an animation driven game like this, there should be a technical lead animator, whatever it is, that will be in charge of all these issues. Like early on, we would realize, right, if we have different body types, even if we share animations, some points of contact will need to be tweaked. And I did some of those. Like if we go on the characters, maybe that only shows up when it's running. Oh yeah, it's on the actual, like I had to do manual IK points when a character is getting grabbed by the cop, thrown on the floor, because the hand position has to slightly change.
I think a nice example of that you showed me was on the mug. Maybe we can show that and show the animation and when it's at full IK and when it's not, when a character is picking up a mug on the countertop.
Yeah.
A nice way to illustrate it.
So the pickup animation was the inspector. So I think I showed this. So there's a value for the IK right hand, and what this does, it will inform like another plugin, Final IK.
Yeah.
We'll make sure that when we when it's at 1, the hand will be snapped wherever the item is, and this is because in the world, right, like this object, let's say it's the counter, right? The counter is an object in the world, and these are all the positions an object can be placed in the counter, and the character can be either here or here, right? You see these blue arrows, so he can be in these 2 positions. Any asset you use, you can be in 2 positions, because if the wife is there, you want to be next to her a little bit. So like looking at the penny, you can look from here or here. So if she's here, you can come here. Exactly. So if you're sitting here, the character will align to the pivot point, but the hand of the animation will not match the exact position. So what I used was the IK defines when the hand is gonna snap, and then when it's at 1, when the value is 1, it means the hand is completely locked into position, which is then informed by these little hands here. So it tries to match these little yellow hands. But then there was another issue, right? Because if the mug is rotated, like the hand can just snap in this position. So there was some adjustments to this. But yeah, and I might as well say another one was footsteps. Figuring out when the foot is on the floor. Because then we put an IK on top to make sure that the feet would slide as little as possible when blending, so it would know if a foot is on the ground, where it's going, and read actually the animation frames of where it, like, so we get all the data for the animation clips, we did some curves out of it, and you would see the curve, and if the foot is going away from the floor, we can unlock it, whether this animation wants to do that or not, so that sliding is as little as possible.
I think another thing that's super interesting about your animation process is that you actually did MOCAP sessions.
Yes.
And you have some process videos to show from that. And then after that, I'd love to look at your use of timeline cutscenes as well for things like the intro of the game.
Yeah. So for motion capture, so what I realized, right, is motion capture is cheaper to mocap and then clean up the animations than keyframe at this scale, and especially the speed at which you do things. And the thing is, like, for example, I have an example here, like let's say like we were doing a session where it's like, look, the cop is knocking out the player, right? And when we do actors, it will inform a lot of decisions about. It has to look good from the top down. Maybe you could move this way, maybe you could this, and then I know the personality of each character, and we can see in real time the performance. And once the performance is done, we have all the nuances of the performance. You know, the way he's rotating his face, the way like his head pendles at the end, the way the shoulder shakes, and keyframing this is very time consuming. So we had a mocap studio that was really big. On the mocap studio, we did an outline of this is the bathroom. Like there's the full outline. Like this is the bedroom. Like here it's the door between the two rooms.
That's really cool.
So for example, when the cop is searching the apartment, right, we could get an actor going from he would walk. He would just say, okay, you got into the room, you're looking around, and he would look around, and I could direct him. I could say, look, you have to go a bit slower because we know the player is in the closet. He's going to be seeing you do this. So maybe do a little pause here, look on the side here. We could play around with the performance live and get 5-6 takes, and then we know that's going to be the one that works in the game. And it's really fast, right? You have this actor that's doing all this work of the performance, and you get like a lot of that straight into the game. So like here's an example of like actually before that. So the actor, like all this is remote. Like I love a lot being remote. Like I was in San Francisco, this studio was in Seattle. So right, like this is the actor would see my little face here. He would see his performance from top down. Then on the other end, we would have someone who was coordinating the effort. So he was guiding the session where he would actually load the 3D model of the world into a screen. And so I could like sometimes I would see it like this.
Wow. Oh my gosh, your process is amazing. I actually had no idea you did it like this.
Yeah, and it was fun. Like we would be we would be figuring out how how quickly do you handcuff. And for example, we were handcuffing and we're like, oh, actually, and I don't know if people will notice this, but when you get handcuffed in the game, at the start he struggles a lot. Second time he's like, we were like, let's get a little narrative on all these actions. So by the 5th time you get handcuffed, he just throws himself on the floor, and the cop is like, huh? Like, why are you not resisting getting handcuffed? So we would do these experiments, and then I guess the parallel to this would be there would be very detailed documents. Like this is the old wife model about everything. Like because when the wife falls on the ground, this position has to be a perfect position, 0.5 meters. That will then transition to the position of trying to get up, or the position of being suffocated. So yeah, we would do these animations, and then they would be. Let me have a couple more here. Like for example, when the wife says hi. Yeah.
Sorry, I was gonna say, you say all this was done remotely. Is this because of the pandemic? Would you?
Oh no. So it's funny, when the pandemic came, it didn't change anything.
Okay.
That's
already how you were working.
Exactly. It didn't affect any of the pipeline. I mean, it affected people emotionally, but pipeline-wise, there was no. And this is the amazing part of it, because I was home. Like I was literally home with, like this window. Like there was the session on one screen. They were seeing my face. I had this document open saying, okay, now we're recording. Get on knees. And if I had a doubt, right, I could literally alt tab to the game world. Look at the limitations I have. I alt tab back into the window, right? And they have you can see when the wife says hi, right? They're half a meter from each other, and she's sitting down. Depending on where you are in the world, she will greet you differently. So if you actually sit down, she will sit down to kiss you. And we could do these tests. You'll see different ideas of how she can kiss you from this position, different attitudes, so it looks more or less fake. And I could see the game world in real time, which was great. I mean, I loved it. It really allowed to, on a very short budget. That's the other thing. It was a very small budget for the game. We don't have many shots at this. We have one shot at getting this going. Look, here's another one. The one we were seeing, the cop punching you and then throwing you on the ground.
Nice. I have two
So
questions.
cool seeing this side by side. Go ahead.
Yeah. First of all, somebody in chat asked was this some mocap studio that you rented out, or that Annapurna helped furnish, or?
Oh no, so this was pretty lucky. So when I was at Rockstar Games, the lead animator, CJ Markham, he used to work in movies. He worked in King Kong and other films, and we became good friends. And then when I was looking, like I was saying, at GDC for MOCAP, and I was like, I don't think I'll do MOCAP because I know zero about this, like zero. And I run into him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I just started my own MOCAP studio, and we're slowly growing." I'm like, "Really?" And we're looking for indie developers. I'm like, "Really?" And then I told
So
him, "Look,
lucky.
yeah, let's work together. But listen, I don't know the costs, and I know zero about MOCAP." And he said, "All good." So he just guided me through all the process, like all the things we need to think about, how to look at MOCAP, like the performance and all the casting process. So this was just like, so I started the MOCAP before I worked with Annapurna. Like the game would have MOCAP no matter what. But we went from maybe 3 to 4 sessions to 10 or 12 sessions because there were more resources to use.
Nice. Yeah, very cool. I guess somebody said it's good to know people. Yeah. I mean, that's all of like your development.
Life, I mean, I think even in life, like I think even knowing your neighbors when you wanna, when you're out of town and you want someone to check your, like, I think networking is crucial for ideas, for creative, but for game development, yeah, for sure. Like the actors, they're knowing the different studios, the different, I don't know, yeah, it's networking is so important.
Yeah, I talk about this all the time at a smaller scale, especially when we're doing game jams for students and stuff. And like, what's the biggest advice? I'm like, learn to work with all the people, those strangers you meet at game jams, because you'd be surprised how often I interview studios who have made it big. And they're like, oh yeah, I met my director when I was doing a game jam in university, or it was always stories like that, always.
Yeah, I think
So many of
everyone
the
in this
people who came-
project, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so many people who joined us for Creator Spotlight had that origin story, right? They started as a game jam. Go ahead, Luis.
Oh, I see. I was going to say, like, so the artist James Stout, who did the environment art for the game, we met. I go to life drawing like once a week to in the evening, like a 3-hour session, and there was another artist doing life drawing too, and we start talking, and he loves games, and he was working in a studio close by, and then I tell him about indie games, and he tells me like, oh yeah, there's this 12 minutes, a time loop. I'm like, what? I'm working on that game. So we became
That's
like
so funny.
best buddies. He was the first person that knew about, and this was like 7 years ago or something, and we started like being friends. And then I was like, yeah, eventually, look, I need art for the game, and that's why when you ask the environment art, like, so he was in the project for like 4 years maybe, coming in and out. Like he comes in for a month, he goes away for a year, then I need help again, he comes in and out. But yeah, like you're right. I think like even how I met Annapurna and how I met, like I did at Xbox, I met them. I was doing a conference in Portugal about games, and I met the Agostino. He was the head of in Europe. He was there at the conference. We start chatting. Oh, I'm like, well, can I see your game? Yeah, sure. It's like, hey, we were, and I was like, and I was telling him how frustrating it is. You talk with the publisher, like, and they are like, oh, we want you to release on this console. We want you to do this. We want you to put some DLC, whatever. There's all these things that they want to, that there's profit in mind. And he was like, no, we just let you do whatever you want. And like, really? And yeah, and then he put me in contact with the US office, and yeah, it's all connections. You're right. It's building these networks and relationships.
Yeah. Awesome. I had another question regarding MOCAP, and like somebody asked, Cypher asked us like way earlier in the stream, but I think this is a good place to bring it up, because as you see, like you probably had to have the script really ready before you started doing MOCAP, but then you said you experimented a lot. So what came first, the script, the coding, the MOCAP? Did you do it outside?
I was thinking about that. I didn't mention. Like I'm talking about like, so first was the first step was those flowcharts that I showed before, where I was figuring out the story. Then that prototype that you saw from Giant Bomb, I made all those animations, right? I went into Max and I keyframed every single animation. So by the time I went to the MOCAP, I mean, look, you can, like, if you guys can pull it up, or I can pull it up on my side. Like if you pull up, I'm gonna pull it up, the Giant Bomb thing. Like you can see how they move, right? It's all a bit. Let's get the cop into the apartment when he arrests you. So right, like I said, I made sure I would answer as many of the design issues as I could. I mean, and you could do this if you have, like, I did it all because I know how to do it. I've been in the industry for a while, so I knew how to animate, and I don't have. But I mean, it makes more sense to have a team to do this. Like I wouldn't pigeonhole myself again. But you see, like I already knew I would have an animation of dropping a character on the floor, which made me even think like, actually, I could jump into Unity to show this if we go back to tools, where there was this. Like I realized, oh, I actually have to make sure that when you drop someone on the floor, it doesn't overlap the other one, which I'm going to go back to the tools and I'll show that. But I mocked up every single animation so that Airtable document, I already knew all the animations I needed. So when we go to the MOCAP session, I know you have to drop the guy on the floor, but I don't know how many times you're going to drop him on the floor. And I was like, well, since we're recording, let's do, look, for example, I knew the wife had to pass out on the table, on the bed after she drank the pills. And I'm like, but when we're in the session, I'm like, wait a second, let's do a ton of variations, you know, let's have you pass out on the left side, the right side, pass out really quickly, pass out slowly. But I knew so when I go into the session, I knew she had to pass out. But then in the session, when the actor is acting the pass out animation, ideas start to come in. Maybe you could pass out really slowly, or for example, when the cop grabs you and he turns you, I realize, what if he turns you and you're in this tiny corner, you know? He won't be able to turn you without you hit the wall. So suddenly, oh, let's get everyone closer together. So yeah, I tried. So to answer the question, was everything was first written on paper, then there was a prototype with no animation, then these really ugly animations that I made that would allow me to set up the IK system, realize all the transitions, build up the animator system to see if, right, is this animator gonna become unmanageable, and what are the variables I need. So by the time I go into production, the focus is in the acting. There's no figuring out how I transition from this animation to the other one. But there are things that need to be solved, like a big one that I don't think was very well solved was when a character is talking to another character. I knew I need to use canned animation. So the system that we ended up doing was like when you talk to someone, let's say you're talking sitting on a chair. I was like, well, let's have neutral, stressed, or angry, right? So if a character is really pissed, he's going to gesticulate more than if he's really chilled out. And then inside each one, let's 10 variations. But this is a thing that I can only know if it works once we've implemented the system, we've recorded it, and it's in the engine, which is kind of too late to change it. Unless you have a bigger budget and you can do more sessions. So this was figured out during a MOCAP session. I'm like, and what is a neutral conversation? What does that mean? Do I get the actor to speak for a minute or just the beginning of a conversation? And once I implemented this, I actually realized the ideal way of having done this is that the gesticulation would come at the beginning of each sentence. Like, remember when I show you these conversations? For example, when she says, I'm stuck in a time loop. So I would record the beginning of a movement, like say, I'm stuck in a time loop. But if the sentence is longer, it would go to an idle after speaking. But because I had already recorded, there was no more budget to record. Then we went into, you know, this is cool with Unity. I could Frankenstein the clips. Like I could have a long clip, like, because you see this clip, this is a recording. Like if I go to this clip and I do a new one, it's a recording of 1,200 frames, right? I just ask the actor to move, just move, you know, pretend you're talking. I'm talking with someone, and then I would go in and I would chop it to figure out how I can use this in the system. So there was a learning. It's cool that I could have a learning process with already processed data. I wish I could go back and record more once I knew exactly what I wanted, but still, it was all very salvageable and workable. Like the head ended up using, like, I was like, oh, I can actually put an IK on the head so that it looks at who's talking if the other person is maybe not exactly around. So there was room to be organic and some room to organize in advance.
Chat's asking if you can bundle all of your tools as a Unity asset so they can all have it.
Make some money on the side.
I mean, the problem, if people want to buy a tool that I don't have to maintain, for sure, I can just dump this. But maintaining and keeping it keeping it. I think some of them, like I'm going to show some that I think could be useful. Like another one was, right, a big thing I realized, like movement in small spaces is super tricky. Like there's all those talks about how doors are challenging in games. Like I experienced that to a level I never thought I would. Doors, like what if someone is opening a door at the same time as you? What if you want to walk through a door as someone is opening the door? What if someone wants to break the door as you open the door? What if you start talking with someone inside the door space? And right, if I show you the navigation,
That's so funny.
Like-
Somebody in chat just mentioned the door. That
Oh.
GDC had a whole talk about doors.
Doors
yeah,
would
like
be such a
I
pain.
could do like a 3-hour talk about the doors in this game, and I didn't solve all the problems with doors. And that's the thing, like I'm solving problems, and I go play Hitman. I'm like, that's why the doors just open and no one, everyone is so far away when they open, or The Sims. I was like, how do big studios deal with doors? And they just most of the time like, nah, I'm not gonna deal with that. They just find other ways, and I wish like. I would love to have had a person dedicated to small movement in enclosed spaces. This would be like it's like the horses in Red Dead Redemption. This would be a 3-year one-man project to figure this out.
That's
Yeah.
pretty funny.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see that role. Unity developer specializing in doors.
And if I go to the door, let me go to the door animations. Like it's crazy. Pick up, drop, dialogues, use door. Oh yeah, so then there's also whether you open the door, right? Because doors, that was the other thing. You're gonna see in a lot of games, the doors, they open both ways. But that's not how they work in real life. Not in 12 minutes. Like each door opens only in a certain direction. So suddenly you're doubling all your animations, whether you're opening a door from one side, open the door in or out. And then in 12 minutes, like these two doors are mirrored. But you cannot mirror their animations because the handle can't be mirrored. So it starts to go into this hole of challenges that I'm like, oh, and I just want a guy to open the door. So yeah, so not only the animations themselves were a lot of work, you know, closing a door, or if you open the door you're moving through, but the code for it. But what I wanted to show, which was a big sideway, was when the cop grabs someone, he has to take them to a position where he's going to drop them, and you have to make sure that right, you don't drop two characters in the same location. And then I'm like, you also have to make sure that, and this happens in the game if you play it a lot, right? You have to make sure the cop is not moving around the whole place to drop your body. So at the start I wrote a system where the cop dynamically calculates the best position in the world to drop you. But the calculation is very expensive, and sometimes I would realize he wants to arrive to another character and he has to walk over someone, and then I would use the nav mesh carving process. But then you might carve a hole that makes the character be locked in the world, and he cannot pass there anymore. So then I start tailoring my positions where you drop a character. But then I need a tool to make sure all positions are valid, which is I'm going to show. So there was a floor reference editor, which builds a list, right, of all the positions that exist, and then I had to visualize them all. So like this thing shows me all the positions you can handcuff a character, right? And let me turn the gizmos off. And it loads like a quick template, which I can look along with the navigation system. And it's so funny as a developer. Like this is what I like in games. I'm talking about such a ridiculous custom thing that will never be used again. Where so you can see all the positions you can drop a character, right? That allow the cop not to hit anything. Like at least one of the two positions has to be valid. And if I turn the gizmos on, you can see like none of these points around the actor can touch the navigation. Did I think, yeah. Let me show the navigation system, right? So like I'm gonna hide the floor, and let's right. So it checks that the position that it drops you is valid, the position that you're dropped in is valid, the position to talk with you is valid, and right, and I still need to have a second position because two characters are dropped on the floor. And then I realized the space is really small once you have someone dropping on the ground. And I wasn't aware of any of this, right, as I'm developing the game. So for example, no one can be dropped here, there's just not enough space. No one can be dropped in the bathroom, so now the cop has to bring you from a room to another room. And then what if the wife is drugged? Like, then I realized you can drug the wife, and as she's going to the bedroom, you can block her way. So suddenly she has to pass out, not in the bedroom. So now you can have a character that's passed out and another character that's been handcuffed, right? And or someone can be handcuffed, and then you can kill yourself close to someone that was handcuffed. And for example, if you try to kill the wife, you have to kill her, but she cannot touch any furniture. So suddenly, that's why when you try to stab the wife, you go into a position in the apartment and you call her to join you, so that you're correctly placed and no furniture will be. And the furniture is like, oh, when you get out of a chair, the chair is away. Oh, when you open the door, right? You cannot open a door and hit someone. So suddenly this tool was growing into the checks that you had to do. So, and for example, if the wife is already drugged, it means the cop only has to worry about handcuffing one character on the floor. So this tool would look at each position, how many pairs it has, or if you stab someone, how many pairs there are for other actions. And it also allowed me to do things where, like, when you're hiding here and the cop is handcuffing the wife, I could be like, oh, actually, I can have like a hero pose for this situation. So you could, like, you can see the wife being tortured, you still don't see the face. You have this, the drop of blood that makes you be more, like, I can do the camera work for this scenario while taking into account the old system. So there's all this whole system for, like, when you kill yourself, all the valid positions, all the relationships, like, you can kill yourself here and still have all these valid handcuffing positions. Yeah, and then it tells
I
you...
love how much visualization there is going on here. You can really
yeah. Yeah, I can hide them all, and I can show all the handcuff positions.
It gives more parade.
Yeah, exactly. And then even like all the space, like if I just show one of them, like here, like when you kill yourself, this is the space that the character will occupy, right? So I know when I'm positioning this one, right, I can be like, oh, this wouldn't work because his legs would be over it, but maybe here. And then it's this gymnastic of, that's why it had to be custom. Asking the computer to calculate this, it just wouldn't work. So like, how much room I have to play someone. Yeah, so this is the floor reference editor. And I think in terms of tools inside, so the other thing was, right, as I build these tools, I realize when I export a build, none of these tools exist. So if a character is being dropped and is in an incorrect position, I can have no way of debugging this. So then I made a big focus of writing all the tools inside the engine. And then I realized, yeah, that's what everyone usually does, right? The tools should be part of the executable, so I don't have to rely on having to use this. And especially when a sound designer is working on the game, can I create tools that he does not have to even have Unity to do his work? Which goes into Fmod. We ended up using Fmod for the project and writing tools, which I'm going to show in a bit, that are all inside the executable that allow you to test and do things without having to have Unity running. Let me see what the audio manager is. Yeah, before I was having an audio manager here that I stopped working on. Yeah, so the only tools I ended up having here were tools that were directly related to working in Unity. And there was like another thing focused on this title was that right, when you're playing the game and you want to interrogate the cop, right, you have to drug the wife, hide in the closet, set up the light switch. I didn't want to be doing those things, so I started to write tools that allow me to jump into those specific things that I'm going to show in a second. But before that, I realized like the narrative of the game is very important, right? Like, especially when someone is playing the game and after 5 loops they're doing something with the character and that thing doesn't make any sense. How do I debug that? How do I know that in loop 5, when you told the wife that the cop is coming and you're living the same day, she didn't react appropriately? Like, there's no way of knowing this. Which I think I'll jump back to these a little bit to answer that question. Like, the answer to that question is actually, like, I wrote a tool that would create kind of a book out of your actions. So I I did a search for log tools, like what programs are there for reading logs, because early on I started to write a log that would track everything you do, right? And I'm going to show you guys, like, here's a log for someone that played the game, like for 33 loops, right? So everything a character would do, it would log what they did. So then I can read a story of their game. Like, for example, let's look at loop, resuming the game on loop 13. It plays a cutscene, right? The wife is waiting in the bathroom. What are they doing? They try to open a door of the bathroom. They hit the locked door. She reacts to it. She says, "Oh," so right. So what I did was I looked for a program, like the most powerful program to read log files, which includes color coding and filtering things. Like, I'm filtering all these things out of what I'm showing you, right? So the log also shows animation. It also it shows every single event in the game, and this allowed me to very quickly read a playthrough, because even if you like, looking at video would be super expensive, right? I'd have to record play sessions, but reading a log allows me to see the narrative that is going through, right? I can see an action of the player on loop 12 after 56 seconds, right? He was pressing buttons. He pressed the button 4, 1, 3. The wife is reacting at the door. He kept pressing buttons. Now she's singing. So this allowed me to look at the game as a story. So if something goes wrong on loop 12, I can see what happened in that loop, and I can even filter, like, let's see all the knowledge that was... Remember early on I spoke about the knowledge, right? Let's say I just want to look at knowledge. Every time someone got knowledge, you know, and then it's color-coded by, like, this is dialogue, but, like, for example, dialogue knowledge is too messy, so I can filter the update dialogues from knowledge. So suddenly I can see all the knowledge that's not in the dialogue, and actually I just want the player dialogue, so, or the wife, like all the times that the wife acquired some knowledge. I think I have to do a second parenthesis here or something. But what I mean is, it allowed me to very quickly read what is happening on any loop, and yellow is the player knowledge, so I could look exactly what knowledge the player get on loop 22. And very quickly would allow me to read the story that happened to someone that played for 8 hours, and what their experience was. You know, like on day 10, they kissed the wife, they were kissed by the wife, or when he drugged the wife for the first time. Like, I could read the narrative of a playthrough very quickly without having to be playing the game or looking at videos.
So out of curiosity, what did you use? It looks like Log Fusion tools used for the color-coded logging.
Yeah, so I look for a log, then I realize I have to color code this, and Log Fusion has this amazing, what is it? Yeah, it has a highlight function. Awesome. That I can make highlight rules. So I just, then I started to write my logs with rules, a bit like, I guess, what you do with, like with a Unity log, right? That you can have warnings, you can have. So doing the same thing on a story narrative log thing. Then I would put actions, I put animation, then I everything I would do, cutscenes, details, audio, then also errors. You know, if someone's trying to do something that causes an error, I could very quickly see what that error is and understand what they were doing that caused the error, which was really big, like especially with playtesting, when someone said, you know, like they would do an order of things that I never thought about, like, and then I would see what they did, and that's the other thing. People are incredibly unreliable narrators of their play sessions, especially in a game that is repetition. Like, I would have people saying, look, the cop does not listen. This was a famous one. The cop is not listening to the wife. And I called him. And I'm like, are you sure you called his daughter? And no, they didn't. Because they've been calling for 5 loops. So they, your brain starts to play tricks on you, and you think you did certain things you didn't do. But it's just, but then it's also an issue in design. How do I fix that? Maybe the player has to remind you, oh, I forgot to call the daughter. But also to be able to see how things are working. And
that's so funny. That's very meta that you're talking about that, because like the game is all about unreliable narrators, and the meta narrative behind it is that people can't reliably tell you.
Yeah, which is a part of it too. Like I realized I could play into this. Like, for example, like like early on you're like, oh, I can drug the wife by I'm gonna set up the dinner, I'm gonna put water in the mugs, and then I put the pills. Then actually I can do a shortcut by just giving her water directly before she wants to drink. I don't need to go to the dinner to drug the wife. And then it's like, actually I can just stab her. But there's this emotional impact in these actions you're doing. But there's also the desire to move forward in the narrative. And there's people who just get desensitized with the killing, and I think that speaks also to the themes of the game, about the things the character was willing to do to arrive at the point that is in, which mirrors the things you're willing to do as a player to solve the problem that you got yourself in the first place. I just find it's pretty interesting as game design goes.
I think it's also interesting, like, you don't do those extreme things at first. You maybe I found that, like, you test those things in much later loops, because you also have this belief, and the character probably has this belief that, oh, it doesn't matter what I do because I'm just gonna fall into the loop again. So that not that it doesn't matter, but the impact won't last. Like,
no, like I remember seeing players that they, like, for example, they killed the wife by, they didn't want to kill it, but they want to see what would happen, and then they find out they can electrocute the cop, and they learn a lot about the loop, and then they were like, what if he doesn't loop anymore? You know, what if this is the end? And I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to cause this to these characters. That's the thing. Like, if I went to do the game again, I think there were things I would have delved deeper into, because I think they were very interesting design challenges that next game I'll do that. The thing I wanted to show was like before I go into the tools inside the game, right? There was this thing that I showed where organizing conversations around knowledge, but another big challenge was organizing how the characters behave. Early on, I was just piling stuff. I was doing like, okay, the wife is in the bathroom. She comes out, she sits down to read a book. And if the door rings, she's gonna answer the door, right? But these things slowly start to accumulate, where what if she's reading the book and she's gonna go answer the door, but then there's a thunder outside and she wants to react. At the same time, maybe you're giving her a glass of water, or maybe you're eating the dessert. Like, does she answer the door and then complain about the dessert? Does she complain about the dessert and then... Or what if she complains about the dessert and then she's going to resume reading her book, but you're sitting where she was sitting, right? There's this... How do I don't get lost in this behavior of the characters? And remember, I showed this flowchart of how they behave, which evolved into this thing. And then I had these actions, right? And I realized there were two things to focus on. There were the conversations, you know, like the wife talking about the dinner, telling you things, which grew into this these like 11 flowcharts of conversations. But then there was the other aspect, which is what the characters do, which is like, if I go to the latest, right, there was this thing that I showed here of, like, the cop enters the house. He goes to the front door, he rings at the door. What if no one answers? He's more aggressive. What if you open the door while he's doing these things? It was hard for me to, how do I organize behavior? That was actually what I want to talk about. And so I started to first organize it linearly. Like, this is the wife's behavior on the whole game. It starts from the top, right, where we have the start of what she does, and then it goes down into those branches. Like, is she relaxing in the living room? Is she waiting for you to prove you're living the same day? Is it about the present, getting the present from the kitchen? Is it a cop coming into the apartment, right? So first I realized I could group things into these broader categories, like all the wife behaviors once there's a cop in the apartment. Because once there's a cop in the apartment, the dinner is not relevant anymore. So I realized, okay, there's these subgroups of behavior. So I started to group them. Like, let's say the wife is preparing the dinner. She prepares the dinner. What if something is missing? She reacts to the fact that you took stuff off the table, and then she goes read in the living room. Or maybe there's no missing items. She finished setting the table. She's gonna go and, you know, turn the lights off, turn the radio on, then call you for dinner. And then call you for dinner is actually a story. Then I start to call them stories, and each story has these little scripts. We call them tasks. So a story has a task, and then a task can branch off based on what's happening. And then I was like, I could actually glue this into the engine the same way I was gluing the conversation. So these are actually the behaviors. Like if I cut this off and I save this file, then she will not cancel having dinner after she waits for you. So like each one of these would then relate into code. So like call Aaron for dinner. If I go in here, I can, right, here's the task of calling you for dinner, which then breaks down into actions, right? She talks to you, then she goes to a location, she looks at you, and then she just waits for you to, I call it complain, but she waits for you to joining her. And then if you don't join, she tells you what the hell you're doing, and then she finishes the task. And then after she finishes it, she does the task of cancel having dinner. And suddenly I could see all the narrative, and I could even go over behavior. Like imagine, like at the start, this was the dinner. She sits down, drinks a glass of water, eats the dinner, gives you the present. But what if you get up during the dinner? Oh, I can just, it's a story inside a story. Where are you going? Because she only complains about you getting up while you're having the dinner. And suddenly I could have this complexity inside things without ever getting lost. Like, because before I would forget that I need a behavior if you get up during the dinner. But now suddenly the dinner, it's encapsulated inside these sections. So it was pretty cool. Like figuring out behavior without going into priority. Like priorities are very confusing for me, because if you're manually assigning priorities, some things might be more important at different times, which would then go into this thing here, where this is like the main behavior of the wife, but then there are the exceptions. Like for example, like if you shoot yourself, it's pretty big reaction, like, or if you get electrocuted, or so I came up with some categories where it's like there's reactions. Like if you're an idiot about the dinner, she's gonna give up the dinner. There's reactions if you break the flower, if you turn the radio on, the music is playing. So there's reactions. Reactions are like things that interrupt the flow, but then you go back to the flow. And then there's panic, you know, like she finds the pocket watch. Like that is completely gonna break whatever is happening, and it becomes its own thing. And once there's a panic, there won't be any reaction, you know. Like, so if she finds the pocket watch and suddenly you're calling 911, or you break a flower, she doesn't care about the flower, because a panic situation is much higher than a reaction. And then there's the end ones, like things that, right, if she's bleeding out, that's it, nothing else will ever interrupt her. Or if she's feeling drugged, she won't react to you leaving the apartment, she won't react to the doorbell ringing. So like organizing dialogues and organizing behaviors was like, this is what took the longest, I would say. This was like a year or two of
Oh wow.
organizing. Like, yeah, because once I had the story, I had to organize it in a way that I can iterate. And these were the pillars of the game, was behavior and dialogues.
So you said, you mentioned though, when you started thinking about this game, Unity was just starting to be on the scene. So how long for full production of this game?
Oh yeah, so I was looking at it the other day. The first documents of the premise were written in 2003, 2004, but the actual development, it started when did it start? Let me see. Wait, I have to it started after we finished The Witness, which I have to look at years, because yeah, let me see. So The Witness was wrapped up in 2016. No, 2018 is when 2016 was when The Witness came out. So I think 2015 is when I started learning Unity. I mean, the programming side of Unity. Actually, the game was all written in JavaScript. Then I swapped to C#. If anyone is here, don't use JavaScript, just use C#. So then converting all these things, and then I think 2016 was mostly learning Unity, figuring out all this documentation and these flowcharts and things.
So that's amazing. You actually learned Unity to make this game. I actually didn't understand that.
Yeah.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good, actually. That's a really good time frame, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's why, actually I want to say two things. One is it was a slow process because I was learning how to do it as I was doing it. It wasn't like I hope my next game was a bit faster. But on the other hand, it was a very pleasurable, like as I think a game developer pleasure is in doing the game. So there, I wasn't in a rush to stop working on the game. Yeah.
So you were showing all these complex behaviors. It's starting to all make sense now, you know, like in the scope of the game. I would love to know now how you made all this readily available for actors. I think that's like a nice way. That's like some of the bigger parts of.
Okay.
There's one thing in animation I'd love to see right before that. I'd love to see just this timeline cutscene that you showed to us right before the show. I would love like with the
I also
clock.
wanted to show the tools, the in-engine tools. I know if you went to that before. I think the in-engine tools would make more sense before we go to the actor stuff.
Sure.
But the timeline, so yeah, the timeline. So this was actually, there's two things that were amazing, and you actually can see them in the prototype. So the phone looks exactly the same it looked in 2015. And this is funny because I was waiting, because remember there was no UI. The UI in Unity before 2015 or 14 was pretty janky. And then you got this new UI system, which was crazy because I could program this phone in like a day. Like I literally had the phone working with the messages, the buttons and everything in like a day or something. And I was so surprised how fast it was to use the UI system to just do this. And then I never changed it. I mean, I removed the time, removed the battery, signal, but it still looks the same. I wish I had gone in and made unique UIs for each character phone, but I just didn't have the time. The other thing, yeah, the timeline. The timeline was great because early on, actually, I'm going to show that quickly. The main menu before was just like this. I was trying to see how I have the menu, and then the game starts. So I was just trying ideas like playing with repetition, playing with claustrophobia, you know. Until I was like, wait, what if? Once I realized, right, the importance of the clock to tie up the two environments, let's have that be part of the menu and then be part of the gameplay. And then I was like, and actually, let's have the clock. We can suddenly start showing narrative through the use of the main menu. So yeah, so I used where is it? Let's go. Yeah. So if I go into the main menu, let's turn that layer on. Okay, it's already enabled. Main menu timeline. No, menu clock. Yeah. So where's the inspector? Let me put it here. Yeah. So all the credits are using the time. I mean, not all the cutscenes use the timeline. Let me go into the project. So like a good example would be when you go from the apartment to the office for the first time. Like big spoilers here. I have to delete the cameras. Okay, there we go. So for example, when you go from right when you have that cutscene that you go from being in the office in the apartment, and then you go straight to the first time you go into the office, and you feel you're going back in time to the flashback. Yeah, I mean, actually, and
you've got the rotate. Those are like the police sirens, right? Like
this is like the day. Don't see the day passing by
with the red and blue. Oh, I see.
It's like it's the cycle of the day, like many days passing, like day night cycle, kind of going back in time. But yeah, man, this was amazing, and it was funny because when I needed to do the phone, you guys dropped the new UI, and the timeline was updated. Like I remember, I didn't use the timeline until it was like pretty solid, and when it was solid, it was great. Yeah, like dropping the objects here, the way you can use the assets, like you can even convert these things into if you open the animator window, you can play with the curves, you can play with everything, and seeing it in real time is just.
And you're just changing that one layer. You're just changing the light, right? With all those.
Yeah, there's two lights that are rotating. And turning on and off, yeah, and change. I think it's the same light. You're right, the same light rotating and changing color. Yeah, the timeline was used for all the cutscenes and transitions, and even like even the loop is a cutscene. It's a plane. It wouldn't make sense to see here, but like when you loop is there's a plane that fades in, does a render to texture from the last frame of the game that fades out as you go into the next scene. So I could even do these, like when you look at the pocket watch and it's fading in, right? I'm loading a cutscene with a timeline that's getting rendered to a texture that's getting slowly imposed on top of the gameplay. And I don't know much programming, right? I learned to program for this game, and I was like, wow, I can have this idea in my mind and then pull it off in Unity, versus having someone write an animation tool that would take like a year plus debugging plus everything, and then maybe I change my mind and I don't want to do this anymore. There was halfway to the project, right? There was this realizing that the tools need to exist inside the executable, separate from Unity, so that anyone can debug. It can be checked anywhere. Like when an issue happens, if someone is playing the game, I want to have more information. So I started to, and especially after I learned the phone UI that I was talking, like I started to, whoa, I could use that UI to build tools and stuff. So I'm just gonna go show some of them and go over what they do. So I'm loading the game here. I'm gonna open the debug menu. So the debug menu, there's like the main debug menu is this one, is the one where right, it has a bunch of different things. The first one is the knowledge, right? It shows the knowledge for every single character, and it allows you, right, to enable or disable, right? And this knowledge is directly related with the thing that I showed before of like, for example, I can only tell the wife I'm leaving the same day if I know that I'm leaving the same day, and when she believes I'm leaving the same day, I cannot tell her again, right? So the believes in restart is right here, right? If she believes in restart, the dialogue would no longer be valid. So here I can see all the ones that have been activated for all the characters, right? So the wife doesn't know anything yet because she just started. But for example, if I turn the radio on, she heard the radio, and actually I think it's a property on the wife. Yes, so there's properties and there's knowledge, but it's not worth going into detail the difference. But this is a property, so there's two tabs for them. There's many properties and knowledge. Properties are more global, you know, like, and they're more shared between characters, you know, it's like being dead, being handcuffed, being busy. While knowledge is more custom to each character. But then in the end, I ended up mixing some properties for story elements. But anyway, so these are getting triggered as things are happening. And this tool allows me to change some of them or change the values of them. For example, it takes 60 seconds for a character to be drugged. A character stays electrocuted for 40 seconds. The wife will wait for you to give her the watch later on for 30 seconds. So I can change those values and I can play with them here without having to use the editor. Another one is this one. It allows me to jump to moments in the narrative, like I was saying before. Like actually, like here I can restart in all the ways there are to restart. Like say I'm going to restart like I was out of time. I survived 10 minutes. In this case, it plays a cutscene using the editor we saw before, and then he's like,
Wait. Oh, god damn it, god damn it, god damn it.
Or for example, like restart the first time you get shot by the cop, where he's like a really strong reaction.
Jesus, fuck. Oh, okay. I'm okay, fuck.
Or for example, I can put here like a number 10, like you've been shot by the cop 10 times and then I restart again. So his behavior,
Shoot me, motherfucker, I'm unkillable.
right, he now knows he will never be killed. So I can quickly
I never
test.
got that one. That's so funny, actually.
Yeah, that's another thing. I realized a lot of the
cocky.
content. Yeah, he's like, he doesn't care anymore. Then I can do things like I can give myself any item in the world. Like I want to get the mug, I can get the object right without having to go pick it up. Any character can get any objects. I can load any cutscene, like the ones we were seeing. Let's say, like when you get into the apartment. Let's load one. Not this one. There's some that are gonna break if you load them at the wrong moment, like the apartment end. This is when you run out of the 10 minutes of the loop. By the one we saw before, I can just load a cutscene quickly. which is great for the sound designer. If he's doing sound, he doesn't have to play the game to do the cutscene. He can just play a cutscene. Is the music working? And Fmod has the capability, I think WIS too, right? It connects straight to the executable. If the executable is exported, allowing that. And so he can do all his work on Fmod, save it, and he gets updated in real time in the game. Another one is like things like, for example, let's say I want to interrogate the cop. I can just click on Aaron interrogates cop. But the wife will have to restart this.
Hey.
Oh yeah, I have to do something. Yeah, so there's things like the AI gets a bit tricky. So I have to drug her first. Wife drugged immediately.
Serious?
And then I interrogate him. And then I have shortcuts. I can turn the light switch quickly. So quickly, suddenly I'm in the moment where the cop is unconscious, and I can, I can get his stuff. So this one is huge, allowing me to jump between any moment in the game. Starting the storm, the table is ready, we're gonna start the dinner. I'm hiding in the closet without having to go through those moments.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like without this tool, it would be almost like painstaking to test. You'd have to play through every loop to get to that moment to test it, and then you might mess it up, and then so it's
exactly
crucial to have something like this.
And then there's like individual tools, like for example, like each object I can quickly change it without using it, or I can like click on an object and they might have properties, like I can immediately unlock the vent without having to do it, or like the plant. The flower is pretty complex, so I can change the state of the flower, if it's drying, if it's healthy, how many I can break it, how many.
Jesus.
Or I can, for example, I can kill a character immediately without having to do anything. In this case, he's gonna kill. I can fast forward time like this, which I'm sure a lot of players would like to have. Or I can test things. For example, if you want to test how the blood system is working, I can do like a little bit of blood, or I can do the default.
Oh, that's so weird.
Yeah, it's
squirting blood, walking around.
Or when you're punched, like bloop bloop, is it sticking to the walls correctly, or when you get shot, right? When you're dying on the floor, there's like this pooling of blood. But right, it's funny if the blood is following me around.
I don't know why this is so funny. This is very morbid, but it's perfect for Halloween. So
yeah.
And look, and this is crazy because once we have the fluid simulation, you see how it goes on all the surfaces.
all over the place. Yeah. So this is not a decal. This is more like OB fluid simulation.
This is the OB fluid. There's no decals. This is real time.
And did you have trouble with optimization with real-time fluid simulation?
I did.
Okay.
that was a very.
Even for something as minor as this, you still had to think about.
Because of the physics and blood simulation requires a lot of particles, and so we have to make them really big. But if they're really big, and you see some stuff, for example, so there are other things I can do. For example, I can get a character like, let's get the wife shot. Oops, I cannot do it that way. Like I'm gonna get the wife to come out quickly, and now let's get her. She's shot. Like if I was shooting the cop, you're gonna see that the blood, because it's so thick and there are particles. You see how it overlaps over the arm of the character. There were these issues that they were tricky to solve. Oh, so I see something invalid, so the game is now broken. Let me load it again. Another thing is it's just changing the state of the objects, like the mug, getting the mug to. I'm gonna show you guys that.
What? No.
So now he's super confused. So that's the other thing that it's tricky with this game. Like if some knowledge gets activated before some other knowledge, it just doesn't make sense, and the game is not designed for that. Yeah, but like for example, the mug, right? I can quickly, put sleeping pills full of water, or like for example the painting. I'm looking at the painting, I want to see the variations. I can quickly, change them without having to, play through all game until I see that painting. Then tools to move the character around, right, without having to actually take him to a location. What else is there? Oh yeah, so the big one is this one. So this shows what every character is doing and what kind of they're thinking. Right, they're sitting down, she's reading, she's in the kitchen. So this is the wife, this is the player. And now look, she wants to grab a glass of water story. You see, so you can see here the task and the story. And right, and this directly relates to, like if I come here and I type grab glass of water, right? She's literally doing this. She started the story, grab glass of water. She already checked for the glass. She didn't have one. I mean, she found the glass in the world. So she's going to grab the glass in the world, right? And when she's done grabbing, when she has the glass, she's going to drink it. So we're going to see the story change to drink glass of water. Right, so she's doing the grab glass. And here's the breakdown of all the steps. Like she's using the object. And now you're going to see like she's going to, then she's going to sit down, then she's going to read a book.
I wasn't expecting a
So this allows me to see all the behaviors of everyone at every single time. For example, if I want to, let's say if I want to grab the mug as a player, right? The player doesn't have a story. He's always idle unless we take over control. For example, if I want to pick up the mug, right, we're going to see he's going to have a task of going to the object and picking the object. Right, and the picking is lined up once the go-to is done, then he does the picking. So it just allows me to see everything that's happening with the characters. This one is just to control the input, right? I can see every object that the mouse is hitting, the properties of the object, and the coordinates. And something also with the inventory, how the inventory works, because the inventory is another camera that's rendering the inventory outside the world, and it's getting imposed on top of the world. So am I raycasting into the inventory or into the game world? Then we have timing stuff, like the time in the world, the time since it started, what time scale we're working on, the slow motion default, what levels are loaded, just information that you'd see in Unit by default, but you don't see in the game. And then the time is like the copy is going to enter at 270 seconds, and we're at 170. So if I want to speed up, so he arrives. And actually, since we're here, I can show something else I wanted to mention. First, we can see the rain. And there's cars passing by. There was an effort trying to make the world as dynamic as possible. Because it's very static environment. So like there's some things like
Hey, I'm reading over here.
there's cars passing by.
Turn the light back on?
And the cars themselves, they even put light into the world. I tried to get some glitter, some shimmering on the candle lights. You know, it's not just a static glow, but it just it changes slightly. So now she's doing the thing that I mentioned, where she's gonna read in the living room, or if I turn it off, she changes to the task of complain about the light. She's gonna wait for
stop playing with the lights?
a bunch of seconds. What other tools are there? Oh yeah, so then there's one here that shows all the dialogues, because it became important to know what's the conversation that has been happening without having to go into the log file.
That's actually very super convenient, I think, especially for point and click games. Like just going through all the narrative knowledge kind of structures is like insanely elaborate.
Yeah. Then there's one for sound design, so I can show all the sounds playing in the world, like the environment sounds, the single sounds. You know, there's room tone, the ambience, right? The effects of opening the doors.
Turn around, please.
Then only the ones that are playing, only the ones that are dialogue related, or isolate audio. You know, like if you want to just listen to the, like say you want to just listen to the ambient of the world, or just the room tone.
Hands behind your back, please.
Will you come help me?
Like now we're just listening to the dialogues in the room tone. So, so there's not stuff disturbing, analyzing certain sounds, and also like the volume, the occlusion level. Because for example, let me restart this. Like the sound changes based on, like if a door is closed, a sound is occluded on the other room. Once the door is open, that sound stops being occluded. So making sure the occlusion is working well. Then there was a music debug. Like once we designed the music, being able to trigger any track of any song, and then there's knowledge that changes the importance of a track. And I think, oh yeah, and then the last one is going to be, what else is there? Yeah, there's IK debug, the other ones we saw. Yeah, and then the last big one would be the dialogue ones that I guess will nicely connect to everything else. So the way the game works, right, is that every conversation we see here on these dialogues, like each one is a sound file, right? So we recorded the actors, they recorded the lines, they came into, maybe we could now go into the dialogue and then come back into this, and that might make more sense. So let's go into that. So right before I partnered with Annapurna, the game didn't have any sound design. And the idea would be that all the dialogues would just be dialogue balloons on top of the characters. It's much cheaper, it's easy, right? I could just edit the dialogue, write it down, and that's it, it's in the game. But then we first Annapurna really liked the title, and I liked a lot of the work they were doing, and then we're like, let's collaborate together, and then we're like, what if we had voices in this game, right? Would that make the experience better, right? Not just the coolness of having them, but is it worth all the effort we're doing? So we the first step we did was like we're talking about. We got some local Los Angeles talented. We invited them to the studio. We all sat down. We printed some dialogues, like literally some conversations like this. And when we asked them to simulate the conversations in the game, you know, like open the door, and then the wife, oh, I'm innocent, and see how these things go. And we got some key moments, like when the wife confesses that she killed her father, when she's crying, or when the player's getting really desperate. So we would just hear these characters, and it was crazy, right? The moment these characters have a voice, they become alive, and you see all these nuances, and you
Definitely.
and even you start like, because I wrote a biography for every single character from the day they were born until the moment the loop starts. And there were a lot of nuances about the way they speak, the way they talk to each other, how aggressive they are. And a lot of that does not come through in the dialogue, but suddenly you have these actors performing the lines, and you get so much more texture that you didn't have before. And because we don't have the faces, there's a very interesting way that they're complementing the animation, and your brain is kind of filling the gaps of not seeing the faces. And it just, rather than being stuck in the uncanny valley, you're actually filling the gaps in your brain of what you're not seeing, and you're more immersed in it.
Yeah,
So
I totally
like,
agree with that.
We're totally doing this. We're getting actors. So then it was the process of doing that. And the first challenge was like right, any actor, you say first, right? You made a package of what the project is about. Right, the story, the beats, what the gameplay, what are our goals, why we're doing this, and we send it out, right? Actors that are available, and actors that are interested in the material, actors that fit with who we believe would be the best choice for the characters, and also super important, actors that understand the complexity of recording for video games, because this is not easy at all. And right, we got actors that are interested, and it was always the same thing. Okay, send us the script. I want to see I liked your pitch. I want to see the full script. And we were like, right, can I send you this file? And they're like, no. Like, well, what is that? Like literally, there's 11 files like this. No one is gonna look at any of this. So it was a challenge. Like, how are we gonna convey things? So we did two things. One was we wrote in script format some of the key moments, and I actually have the file here. Right, we literally made a script, selected scenes for casting. We wrote these scenes, right, the main scenes. We converted what was written here literally like a script. Right, the classical way of writing scripts, where the actors were comfortable, they could understand more the language and the work we were doing with the writing and write the personalities. But we knew on the back of the minds, even if this went through, they were like, I want to see the full script. I want to see what the whole story is. And also for recording, like actually recording was the trickiest thing. Like even after seeing this, like so now everyone knows who the actors are. They were all interested. They liked the project. They were curious. We explained them, right? So we showed them these scenes. We did some sessions with like some table reading where, they all play their characters, and we, like James, Willem, Daisy, they were all playing the characters, they were getting comfortable with the characters. We very quickly realized that there was no way they could know the whole story, right? It's just too big. They could not memorize all the lines. So we just went through like the major beats of the story so they would understand kind of the overall arch, and they read the bios. But then the big challenge was, how are they going to read for the sessions? So our plan for a long time was that, so funny to be sharing this. So the plan was that, right, everything would be remote. Like everything had been remote up to this point. COVID was now happening. Daisy and James are in London. Willem is in Italy, and they're moving between schedules and production. So we knew it would be remote no matter what. So the challenge was, how are they going to read this? So my proposal was that I would share my screen. Each actor would have an iPad, and we just scroll as they act, which they were like, that makes no sense. I cannot prepare for the session. I cannot write my notes on some beats. So yeah, we did, like, this was like month and a half. It was a nightmare, no doubt, of first categorizing things, like some conversations you realize characters can only speak in groups of 2. So categorizing the conversations, though. So these little bars here for this document was categorizing groups of conversation. Like, for example, all these conversations are conversations of the main character talking with the wife about the murder of her father, right? So we would kind of do a chronological organization of the things that would allow, like, let's have a session where all this session is James and Daisy talking about the murder, and they know the context of this day of recording, and we can focus on that. So for all the documents we have, organizing everything, figuring out like a month and a half of sessions, when the sessions would be, how to organize the sessions, because I learned about, right, when you're recording efforts, you don't want to, if an actor has to do a lot of screaming and crying and shouting, you leave that to the end of a session so that their voice is not worn out. So there was all this logistics of organizing, and right, what we ended up with after a ton of many months of a big team working on this was with these, right? We first we made a key, right? There's a first page, like we had to simplify all this, right? There's a description of the scene, there's a title, there's a color coding for each character, and then kind of explaining, which will also help me understand the complexity of what we're doing. Like, every conversation can maybe play once in a given loop. It might change, right? Telling you I'm ready for dinner after I've eaten the meal is different from let's have dinner when I don't know about the meal, where there's going to be a reply after, a list of the possible replies, and then like the files were just organized, kind of like, similar to a script, but with our chunky format of copy pasting, right? Copy pasting these, removing code stuff, and adding an explanation for every single conversation, which was brutal,
Some people in the chat are wondering, and I'm also wondering, how you actually reached out to the actors in the first place, like how you got in touch with such high-profile actors, and how you brought them on board. Like, what did Annapurna carry all that like load for you? How does that first contact?
Yeah, that is, I think, if I hadn't partnered with Annapurna, I'm not sure this would have been possible. But the way it's done is you send out. It's literally you send out. There's casting agencies, right? You connect to a casting agency, and they reach out to you tell them, like we had 4 or 5 actors for the cop, 4 or 5, like, we have our favorites, people we like, and then a casting agency gets like, it just filters, it tells you, look, these, like, half of them are working in stuff, you just cannot, they're not available. The ones that are available, they have to be available at the same time, so you get this filtering, and then the ones that are available, which ones are actually interested. So it's about a year. It took a year of back and forth, figuring out things, talking, preparing all this material, right? Sending them, like, it was a learning process of until you get actors that are interested and believe in the material and understand the complexity of it, and then
And the process too was also very interesting. I believe you have like some screenshots or like a video that you can scrub through to show us. Like,
so
how that worked.
We did a little making of. So as we were doing 12 minutes, right? Remember I was talking about the marketing and the importance of it. We were like, if we're gonna record this, let's actually record this process. So we did a little making of, right? Where we like, here's an example of a session. Like this is Willem in Italy interacting with James. So the camera you see there, it's James on Zoom in London. Willem is in Italy on a both on a soundstage in real time. Then there's another camera which is me telling them what to do. And then here, right, this is literally the pages of like these pages, right?
Oh yeah, I see them on the
yeah with the color. So and I actually it's funny, like this one, like, so here's me. So the
like
issue,
looking
right?
like Zordon on a massive screen. Yeah.
Like the challenge here, right, was like, because like so I hired actors to help out because English, I'm Portuguese, right? English is not my main language. So, and I wrote the game in a very practical way as a game designer, you know, like the wife needs to hint that there's a storm coming so that you know how to prove the storm. So I just write, oh, thunder, oh, lightning. I wasn't expecting a storm. But then, right, we need this to be said with the voice of the character. So we hired a team of writers that for like 1 or 2 years, they were just going over all this, massaging, organizing the conversation so things would flow correctly. And that's right. That's what the final script is this this tailored, the way they speak, the way they pause, even like something I didn't realize. Like when two characters are talking, it's very important to have a back and forth, not have just someone brrr, or when every time there's too much exposition. Yeah, but what I wanted to say is, I totally forgot, was that no one remembered things but me about conversations, you know, like, for example, this conversation, like, the way it would go, it would be like, look, Willem, you've been electrocuted. It had to be very short, right? We don't have much time, though. You're on the floor, you've been handcuffed, the wife is passed out because the player just drugged her, you just wake up. Like, I would describe the point of view of the cop character to Willem, and then describe to James up to that point what's going on, and then they would, you know, go with the text, and I was like, okay, you're showing him the watch, you know, and now he didn't reply, you show him again, you know, you're a bit more pissed. Now the same scene, but you know, you already, the player has already learned that the cop, like here, he doesn't know anything about the watch. Here, he already knows that the watch exists. Here, he knows the watch, and he knows why the cop wants the watch, right? So he's more teasing him about the conversation. Now he gives up talking about it. So there was this requirement of like just explaining him the exact context of the line, which is what's happening here, and then they would go over the lines. And,
do they ever? You said that they add a lot of nuance and different flavors and really bring the characters to life. But do they ever question some of the decisions, or do you end up changing?
Yeah, there was a lot of like there was that learning process. Like the first thing is characters are driven. Like actors work with motivations. They need to know the motivation of the character in a certain scene. But for me, it's more, I just want to convey this design moment of, like if you take the spoon off the table, if you start eating the dessert, the wife, but a character needs to understand why is he eating the dessert before. So it was great. We had a casting director which was on the sessions, and she would help me speak with the actors, you know, instead of saying I need to be more angry or more irritated, it was more understanding, like maybe there needs to be more tonality on your voice, or we need more musicality on the voice, or we need to accentuate this emotion at this beat. So there was this process of knowing how to communicate what is needed in terms of direction, and then it was also like the actors we were finding out how the characters would behave, right? And for example, on Daisy K's, like her character has a lot of, like the player can be an idiot for many times, right? You turn the light on and off, you pick up the food, you open the present, and we didn't want the wife to be a naggy wife, So how do we get a character that takes things a bit as a joke, but she still has to have this strength to her about, right? She's still hiding what happened in the past. So this was up to them to figure out. So as we recorded the lines, right, there will be some lines that is like, this is too aggressive, or she would be like, I'm gonna texture it a different way, or same with James. Like we had some lines that, and James had this challenge of, you must say this line as you've said it 100 times, but you cannot go off the rails because it also has to fit with whatever you've said before and feel still organic in a way.
Wow.
So finding out how much room there is to go off, and so they did this groundwork of figuring out, or even with Willem, like the first pass on the cop character, he was very aggressive, he was a bit generic, I would say. Like that's our take, like let's have this really aggressive character, but then Willem was like, look, this is going to be a bit flat, how about we push it back a bit, right? We feel this urgency, but this guy has been doing this for so long that we feel the control, right? This guy is under control. He's done this a million times. And then we're like, yeah, and this is going to work very well, because then we have this contrast once he's handcuffed, right? Suddenly once he's handcuffed, once he's handcuffed and you've tortured him, we have this whole other side where I might die tonight, you know, and I'm no longer, like, I wanted to save my daughter, I'm risking all this, and now this is all going off rails, and we can play these two tonalities, you know. And so they did all this work of helping figure out how to texture these things.
We have a question from the chat. Did you feel like a film director while doing all of this? Like directing the actors?
I don't know what a film director feels, you know. I've never made a film. Like, I don't know. Like I also, like, this is like a MOCAP session. Like, you have to think about, right? You have like 200 animations to do in a day. You've rented a space. There's catering. There's 2 actors that put a MOCAP suit. There's all this effort, and I have to capture, like, in the end I need this data to put in the game. There's so many variables that there's an incredible hard focus on what is being executed at that moment. There's no I don't know, I imagine a film director is probably stressed making sure everything is fitting, because he's thinking about the editing room in a year, where he's getting all this, like, he's getting the material. That's it. Like, it's making sure we get the material needed for I guess I don't know what the film director feels like. It's, yeah.
I'm also wondering, like, what kind of energy did the actors come into the room with? Did they was there a feeling like they treated it with the same respect as they would have had they walked into a movie, or were they really excited that they were in a different medium? They're working in a games medium now. Did they have a lot of questions since it is a different medium?
So I think the first days there was a bit of what are we doing, right? What is this project? How, because, right, no one knows me, right? Like, does this guy know what he's doing? I think there was this, but I think that it became clear that I kind of knew what I was doing. So the relationship, we all got more comfortable with each other.
Kind of earned the respect almost.
Yeah, like they saw the level of preparation that I had for each session, and there was a lot of work that needed to be done. Like we had pages and pages of lines to record, that just the lines, even not talking about the takes we want to do for each line, these would be like a month or a bit more of recording that we had to be doing. So, and then anyway, there was all this process that they understood that we knew what we were doing. Right? We were it's hard, and they were super prepared. I think they were like, I think it was as a result, it was an organic relationship. Like, they come in and they're like, be sure to have your material ready so I can give my best performance. What was the other aspect that you were? What else were you guys? There was like 2-3 questions in there.
Oh, it was more like, were they excited that they were in a new medium as well?
Yeah, they were. I mean, Willem, he had worked with Quantic Dream on I forget the name. Like, he already did a couple of video games. So Deji and James were the only ones who I think were surprised by, like, the amount of times James had to repeat the same line.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Like, but really, like, for example, there's the line of table set. And it's on my brain, you know? Like, when you set the table, you tell the wife the table is set. But if you might not have set the table correct by missing a mug, a spoon. So, right, there's a single line for every single thing that you didn't set up for the table, whether you... So, but James has to prompt Daisy for the line. So, right, so here it is saying table set, table's ready, nah, nah, nah. So there's this understanding that there's a lot of repetition, and also understanding that how things will be glued. So we went over that with them, so they would understand. Yeah, but I think that was it. They got it super quickly, and they understood the nuances and the variations we need to do and how things would glue.
And once the project was done and after release, did you ever have contact with them again about the, after the release?
Yeah, we did some interviews after the release. Yeah, I mean, I don't think they play the game. I know Willem, yeah, and they were asked, like, we're doing some interviews, and yeah, Willem doesn't play. James used to play Oblivion, but doesn't play much anymore. Yeah. He doesn't have an Xbox. That's what he said. He doesn't have a PC or an Xbox. And
send them the playthrough. Send them a full video playthrough.
No, I mean, yeah, I think it'd be great they play one day, but I don't think they like to play many of the things they like watching your own movies.
Right. It's hard.
Yeah.
So do we have it? I'm gonna start wrapping up because we've taken this a little bit over 4 hours now.
That's amazing.
But this is really interesting. I think I love that you worked with voice actors. I think that's like kind of the defining aspect of the game. I've talked to people who don't know anything about games, but when I mentioned 12 minutes, they knew what I was talking about. They're like, oh yeah, that game with Willem Dafoe, or yeah, I heard it was a really great cinematic piece. They didn't actually even understand it was a game per se. So that's to me like a great broach into
that's
that.
Great.
Like, yeah, new space. I got very excited. I'm like, oh well, let me play it for you.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. And when you talked about how voice actors really add an extra layer to the game, like I know a classic point and click adventure game is Monkey Island, the first and second one. Those were really classic games, and then the remastered had voice actors in it, and it just made a completely different experience. And then you could not play Monkey Island without listening to those voice actors.
It's like
right?
missing something. Yeah, exactly. It's like it's missing something. It's incomplete in a way.
Yeah. So that's how I felt playing it. And I was like, oh man, like this is would never be the same without this. So it's really great.
No, and we changed a lot of things too. That's what I mean. Like once the voice acting was, so we split the recording sessions. Actually, I didn't mention that. We had like 4 or 5, then we had a gap of 2-3 weeks, then a couple more. So in that gap, we would put all their recordings in the game, and we would play the game, and we would see, right? Because early on, I wanted to be very naturalistic. Like let's keep it very natural. There's no exaggeration. But we quickly realized that if your voice is conveying the expressions, if she's smiling, she has to open more the mouth. Like we have to feel the smile through the voice, the tears or the anxiety through the throat. So we were doing these, tweaks through the sessions to arrive at those things.
I think you're saying that you don't know what it feels like to be a director, but from the way you talked so far in this entire stream, the level of intense neuroticism and the cameras where you're watching all the actors with all their tiny little finger movements.
You sound like a director.
very Kubrick-esque, very Wes Anderson-esque. So I think you're there.
I would love to ask, just to wrap it up, this was a long journey for you. You've clearly so many lessons along the way. We have a lot of up and coming developers watching this stream, and some people who have released a few games as well. Any final takeaways, some words of advice maybe you have for the people watching? Not to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna put you on the spot.
I think I have 2 advices. Like one of them we already went over, which is as a game developer, I think you should listen to the thing that you're doing. Like your work is gonna talk to you eventually. And you might want it to go in a certain direction because it's what you're set when you started to do it, but you should let it. And then this sounds vague, but like 12 minutes, there's a lot of, I hope there's some examples of like the camera, the top down, the like everything, like even the way we did the trailers, like all these decisions. Like I was even going to connect to what you mentioned about people not knowing if it's a game. Like we realized as we were like, what was it? When I started this game, it was just a time loop. I want to do a game about repetition and time loops. There's something in here, but it became an interactive thriller, right? And the game was even saying, don't make me a video game. Take me towards this narrative experience. Listen to it, right? Versus like that's the thing. And I was like, oh, and because I'm coding, I think there's this thing as a designer, you're getting your hands dirty. So I'm making these decisions, right? If like early on, I actually had a wheel. Like I was following adventure games. I had a wheel for the fridge. Look, open, and I was like,
Taste.
Why do I want to look at the fridge? I was like, there's no point in looking at the fridge. I'm like, oh, because that's what I know as from the games I've played. That's the vocabulary. Like if I just rely on what I know, it will be, I think, harder to break new ground or arrive at something that's fresh. And the thing that's funny is that the project you do will tell you kind of, this doesn't fit me in a way. This is not my personality, or this is not what I'm. So that would be one of them. Like, and this would apply for a platform game. You know, how wide does your character jump? Why does he slide this way? Like, why does the animal look like this? Do you like every design decision, everything you program? Does this go towards what I'm trying to say? And I think the next one would probably be to, which I also mentioned, is just be very comfortable not knowing what you're doing, because we never know what you're doing in life. I think that's the truth. Like we can, like I have kids, and I have no idea what I'm doing as a parent. I'm doing the best I can at every single moment, but that's what it is. Like be aware that you're doing the best you can based on what you know. Because you're gonna fail a lot. And I remember like when I was a lead artist at Ubisoft and then I was art director, when I was lead for the first time, I had this idea of, now I need to show that I know what I'm doing all the time, you know? But that actually stops you from empowering the people you're supposed to be leading. You're supposed to not, they're there to know those things. So being comfortable saying, guys, we have to solve this, let's go, versus I know how to do this, which also allows me to be like, we want voice actors. Yeah, do I have any idea how to work with them? No. But now I know I don't know that. Versus going in, I think if I went to a voice recording session saying I'm fully in control, it would be a failure. Versus I have no idea, so I prepared the best I could. And we run into things we don't know, right? Like, I didn't know how to convert the scripts into dialogue. I didn't know if I get funding for the, like, game development especially is super hardcore, I think. The amount of juxtaposition of knowledge, you know, from different walks of life. So yeah, be comfortable being completely lost. I think it's great. I think really like even Unity, I don't know how to program, I don't know nothing. It's good. We're gonna figure it out. Or you won't. Then you're gonna do something else, but you have the answer about it. Yeah, that will be my takeaway.
Thank you so much, Luis. And honestly, thank you so much for giving us so much of your time and for being so vulnerable about your like entire game development journey, and for sharing so much information with us. And big thank you for the audience who stuck around for like all 4 hours and 20 minutes. Really incredible. I would love if you want to see more of these creator spotlights, please follow us here on Twitch. Next week we will be having, I think, our last creator spotlight of the year on Wednesday with Outer Wilds. So that's one that's a
great game.
It's a great game, and I think it's going to be a really awesome show. Another show you don't want to watch. Big spoiler warning before you play it. So play Outer Wilds before next week if you haven't. That's going to be a great show. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And Carol, anything else?
Nope. So we have a few other streams next week, so make sure you join us. You can follow us, and we're going to put the schedule up here on our page, but we'll also be mentioning it on our Twitch, so Twitter, so you can follow there. We're going to have a couple of publisher showcases, a Humble Bundle stream, so we're going to play all the top 10 games that you use the Humble Bundle showcase for, and like Hasan just said, Outer Wilds, so we have a jam-packed stream next week. I hope you guys are ready. And so that's it. Thank you so much, Luis, for coming by. We were really excited to have you. We've been waiting very patiently for you to be ready to come on.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It was cathartic to throw.
Our pleasure. All right.
Thank you guys.
Thanks,
Ciao,
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a good one.